Ladies and gentlemen, the end, the real end, is upon us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to MythVision Podcast. I have Gnostic Informant joining us today. How you doing, Neil?
Doing great. I'm looking forward to this live. Let's do this.
I am too. I'm over here trying to figure out how to use my equipment.
That's why I just it's so easy. You just set it down.
Well, you know what, man? I figure we would do another follow-up. I've been getting a lot of notifications. I am subscribed, of course, but I'm subscribed to several people, and lately I've been getting a lot by Ruslan. So before you feel like I'm just taking aimless jabs at this gentleman here, my hope is at some point to go in person and talk with him, of course, about why the evidence is not convincing and why I am not a believer anymore. But I would want to really spell this out and go in depth with him to discuss these kind of issues. And if you notice something too, I gotta show this. This is very important. Look very carefully at some of these thumbnails, right? You see the circles? They're highlighting very important pieces of information, like ancient lost city of Sodom discovered. You saw yesterday. Look at the blurred thing that he doesn't want you to see. That's there. It's a thing. No, he's very clever.
That's a slick way to make a thumbnail, because someone's scrolling down, just scrolling through YouTube looking for some content, and they see that circle with the zoom in. They're clicking, and then that's it. He got your click. He's got the ad roll playing. He's got it. You can stay your leave now. But it
is smart. I'm not knocking it.
Good way to make a thumbnail. It's a slick way.
Very slick. But
I've done it a few times.
Let's be real. Like, some of this stuff is extremely sensational. And so for those who are curious what I mean by sensational, a person who presents stories in a way that is intended to provoke public interest or excitement at the expense of accuracy. Okay. This adjective, presenting stories in a way that is intended to provoke public interest or excitement at the expense of accuracy. Sensational.
I do want to say, to give him benefit of the doubt, the YouTube algorithm, and you and I have been really noticing this lately, really like forces people into making titles and thumbnails that you might not really wanted to do, right. But like, you're like, what? I know that if I do it like this, I'll get 10 times the amount of views.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, I don't even really knock them for that, but
yeah. I mean, people will knock you no matter what. I have fans of mine who don't like this will blow your mind.
I get it. I see those texts.
We get over the fact that it says this will blow your mind, since I'd say 70-80% of the viewers who've never heard it really do feel like this is shocking, great, amazing information. Don't spoil the fun for everybody, right? That's
what I've noticed. Like, a lot of these videos where I'll do that, I'll put like Roman religion origins is mind-blowing, and some people will say, come on with the mind-blowing stuff, dude. But then I'll have another person 5 minutes later say, my mind is blown.
My mind is blown.
So it's everybody has their own way to how they look at it, you know.
Yeah. And look, some people are far more read, so this is not shocking information. It might even be stuff they're like, I've known that for 10 years. Okay. Why type that out? Did you need the attention since you knew this information already? Is it everybody pat the genius in the chat, on the back? Look, we all get it. Just try to let others experience things for the first time and enjoy it. And in fact, I'm coming across information that I'm certain viewers, I have such a smart following of people who watch us because they're critical thinkers. There's people who investigate, research the myths and legends and ancient literature. I'm just now coming across, and I don't know if you know this by now, Neil, but you probably do. I get excited when I discover this stuff. So I want to make this exciting as possible for more people. That is the goal.
Exactly.
And a lot of this stuff is, you got to go read an article that is found, somewhere hidden on the web, or a book. And so most people aren't reading
Well,
this material.
That's what what's his name from the website? What's it called? The hold on one second. Perseus Tufts.
Yeah.
That's what he said to us. He said, I like what you guys are doing because a lot of the stuff that's happening in academia is academics writing journal articles for other academics using language that most people will not understand. They're not they don't know Greek or Hebrew. Like they can't read these journals. You and I are trying to be the medium and bring it to the people who are at our level, as far as like not having that academic lingo, not understanding all that stuff, but being able to like reinterpret it for people like you and me.
Right. That's because we came across this material, but the way we did, it was not packaged this way. I mean, I've looked on YouTube, you're going to find some good stuff here and there. And then there's some of this material that I've never seen packaged in a way that's for, like, there's a lecture where a scholar might mention something in passing in a lecture or something. And it's like, how many people viewed that? And then you look and you're like, 700 views, 8-year-old video, 700 views, 8 years on the internet. And like, whoa, how come this is not out there more? So I made the thumbnail, of course, and you see I did the circle trick where I just took you closer to Ruslan's eye to point out the secret in this video that you're going to discover in the end. You won't know till you watch this whole live stream what the secret here with the eye is. There is no secret. I'm just literally saying that because that's the kind of stuff that gets you to click. It's psychological. But there's a lot of videos, Neil, that I've come across on his channel. And we know Christian content, creators, different apologists that are out there. They have different angles. But I got to give this guy some credit, but I also got to. So it's a double-edged sword here. And part of it's like, cool, good move, business move, right? You're hitting like the Joe Rogans. You're hitting all the popular, I would almost call it a drama Christian channel, because what he wants is that clout and attention at the same, and that's the good business move. The other part is like the accuracy and the just, I'm like giving you honestly sensational material, and it just lacks any serious content. He's not very fond of theological thinking. I had Brady Goodwin, who was, the rapper, the Christian rapper who was on, and like, he is not a fan of Christians who are very deep into theology. God forbid you get really sucked into a theological worldview as a Christian. You're trying to wrestle with scripture and understand the true meaning and stuff. No. Just he almost seems more of the guy who goes off his fills. And that seems to be perceived throughout his videos. It's like, yeah, who cares about those? Let's not die on these hills. But then, okay, the Trinity isn't true. What about a Christian who doesn't think the Trinity is the case? Is this guy still good in your book? Because, they burn people alive for not believing this stuff in the past. I understand we'd be on the same page and saying that's wicked and evil and totally wrong. My humanist worldview would help me to come to that conclusion. However, we're looking at it going, this doctrine is very important in the whole scheme of Christianity. Do we just push it aside since we're not that theological minded? Should we just, as Christians, like, come on, guys, we all believe in Christ, right? I mean, you think he was just a man and that his father was only God. And I think he was God in the flesh, one with the Father and the Holy Spirit. It's not that big of a deal. Is it soteriologically related? If you don't believe this, will you go to hell? These are questions Christians have been saying for a long time. Yes, you will. What's the answer? Well, unless you study to know your stuff really, really well, then, maybe you should do that if you're really a serious Christian. I don't know. Instead of just going with the emotions. But Neil, should I play something here, man? Should we give people some of the
something to react to?
All right, we're going to do some reacting. We're going to have fun. If you have any videos that you feel like doing, I don't want to just pick on Ruslan because I do want to come on his channel at some point.
I brought one from Inspiring Philosophy that him and I had a discussion on Twitter.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring it to you and show and get your thoughts on it.
Okay. All right. And this will be fresh because I have not heard this. But I do hope that down the road I get the opportunity to come meet Ruslan and give him my 2 cents in person, and he can give me his, and we can have a friendly conversation. I want to say this before we critique any further. Ideas, people. I get along with everybody, pretty much everybody. There's some people who don't get along with me or may not like me. That's not me. I imagine in the real world, internet not watching, cameras off, we probably get along just fine. We would disagree like on several issues, but we'd probably, I say probably, would get along just fine. I mean, I've communicated via text. We've talked about me going down there, things like that. So I want to say that up front. The ideas, I'm trying to be accurate. This is what led me out of thinking my little bubble was the truth and everyone else was wrong. This is why he even mentions in his videos Christians. I've been watching some since yesterday with the Sodom and Gomorrah thing. Today, we're going to talk about some other stuff. But the infighting amongst Christians, there's a reason that that's always been. And it's not new. It's been happening since the start of this thing we call Christianity. And the end times dilemma, that's been going on since this literature was produced. In fact, it may go back to the very mouths of the historical Jesus as an apocalyptic prophet. So let's see what he has to say about, actually, let me share my screen and actually play. We're going to go with the end times trumpets here because that.
Wow. So wait, before you play it, what's the deal with this? What's going on here? What does he mean by it?
Well,
should we just play it then first?
Read it. So look, end times trumpet heard by millions, finally caught on camera?
No, that's a big
question mark.
So so far off the bat, my mind's thinking, you're saying that millions of people have heard trumpets and not one news article, it's not live on CNN right now. No one's talking about it, but you are going to tell me this information. Like right off the bat, I'm like, what's good? You serious right now? Is this for real? Is this satire?
Dude, Ruslan is in the chat. Ruslan, thank you for joining in here, man.
Nice.
Dude, we've texted on the phone, right? But I have to confess, right? I do think that this video right here is grabbing the heartstrings. Let me give you my perception before I hit play.
He said in his defense, I call it nonsense all the time.
Well, so then
let's play it.
Okay, okay. Maybe I'm misinterpreting you, and this is why we got to meet in person. I definitely can't wait to come down there and do that. So I felt, let me give you my perception of watching the video, and I am subscribed. So, there's no animosity here. I literally, you get paid through the advertisements like me, same thing. This video felt like you weren't taking a stand like it was, but you gave enough of the feels in it that people like me who were serious about trying to figure out and believe the end times was any moment now and had nightmares about the second coming, from lightning bolts to fire filling up the sky and stuff. This stuff really psychologically had chains on my mind. And when I was, a fundamentalist several years, over a decade ago, lots of Christians watch your material, and this is going to give them the hopes or the thoughts or even the fear. My wife used to have dreams about me being raptured because I was the most devout, serious one in the family. And she thought, am I going to be left behind? She just wasn't naturally in, right? And this stuff right here cast a lot of fear in a lot of people's minds. So I hope I can play this here and nothing happens. Here we go.
There's been reports that millions of people around the world are hearing trumpet-like noises from the sky. This leads many end times enthusiasts to question if these are signs of the time that Jesus' return may be imminent, as in he could.
It does. Yes. I'm pausing it just to say your editing is phenomenal. Send me the editor that you're using. But on some real stuff right here out the bat, you're going to get noises. He plays noises and stuff. Do you want me to keep going?
Keep going, yeah.
All right.
Come back at any moment. The UFO enthusiasts are saying this is actually pointing to the validity that UFOs are here and are visiting us in a personal way. And there's a third option that's much more darker. But first, let's look at some of these clips.
You think it back. I don't know if the third option gets discussed in the
Demons?
actual video, but
Isn't it demons? Maybe we'll see. I guess you're right.
yeah, I figured it might be, or it's just the darker option is the Book of Revelation and saying that the apocalypse is among us. All right.
And check out this one that some hikers caught while on a trail in Alberta, Canada. And this next one is out of Finland.
What are you thinking so far?
Well, I don't. When I see a video, like I don't know what to think. I don't know. I don't know who the person is who's making the video. I'm just saying, like, let's just say these are real. That's pretty interesting. Like, what kind of phenomena causes that? I don't know.
Right.
But like, my mind is almost like, whose video is this? What's going on? Is there editing done? I don't know. I'm just being honest. Like, but if it was real, I would say, wow, that's interesting. What kind of phenomena causes a noise like that to happen?
That was my thoughts. Imagine it was no trumpet, no guy like on a hill or the neighborhood. When I was in Kuwait, I got woke up early in the morning and they were doing their Muslim prayer over the intercom. Like the whole city, you get like it goes through the walls. You're going to hear it. And I woke up like, what's happening? And it was just the guy down, in the hotel area was like, oh, this is normal. Every day we have morning prayer. And I'm like, whoo, but I'm curious to know if natural phenomena, if there's an explanation for why a noise might be like that. Are there natural reasons? To hype it and connect it to Revelation, which I want to get into the book and explain why. And even Michael Jones, right? He interviewed Bart Ehrman on this. Michael Jones, I got to use a Christian when I'm trying to explain to Christians. You can't trust me. You can't take my word. I'm not a Christian anymore. So anything I say on these topics just goes in one ear and out the other or is ignored. But even Michael Jones thinks, hey, this book is talking about stuff back in the 1st century, 2nd century. Like this is not a book for us today. And I know a lot of Christians won't accept that. They kind of want the end to be a thing that's coming. And
well, here's the sad reality about that. Christians have been saying this since the 1st century.
Yeah.
We have and then it just keeps 2nd century, early church, once we get into the 3rd century for Irenaeus, Julius Africanus, all these different popes, Pope Sylvester in the year 1000. So right. every century there's like at least 10 big theologian names that are going to say we have 10 years left. We have 5 years left. We have it's always right about to happen. There's nobody comes along and says, all right, I'm thinking nobody in like the year 500, for example. I'm just going to make this hypothetical. Nope. You don't see any text of like some church father from the year 200 going, I think the year 2012 is going to be the end. No, they're always like 10 more years, 5 more years. According to Revelation, it's coming. He's coming right now. So like they've been waiting for the end. It's always tomorrow. And by the way, you always hear this. You see this on social media with Christians. They'll be like, with everything that's going on in politics, it's Revelation's lining up perfectly with everything that's happening today. Well, right. The same people were saying the same thing in any century, because you can find events that are happening in any century, and then you can say, that sounds a little bit like Revelation 12. That sounds a lot like Revelation 15. You can just map things on to whatever time period you're in. And I guarantee you, in the year 3000, there'll be some Christians living around in that time. Not a lot, but there will be some who will say, any day now. You see this politician, he's got to be working for Satan. That's got to be because of Revelation, Nero 666. It's just going to keep happening.
Yeah, numerology, vagueness, ambiguity, interpretive, text that have like this weird, you can almost make it, like you say, fit anything. In fact, some scholars think the reason it was written this way is to kind of leave open the room of possibility. Jews have had centuries at kind of, it's now, it's going to happen in our generation. And in fact, Jesus is not the first guy on the block to had kind of had the doomsday tick time of like, this is going to happen soon. This generation will not pass away. And of course, there are several interpretations Christians have come up with over time to try and get out of this pickle. But the idea of the Dead Sea Scroll community, the Qumran sect, they had in the Habakkuk Pesher, literally used kind of the Danielic timetable, saying, hey, it's going to happen in our generation, the teacher of righteousness. He literally dies, and they still have some, like, he's going to come back. It seems that he's going to come back. I cannot remember exactly the details of that Habakkuk Pesher and the idea of the teacher of righteousness here, but they had a doomsday expectation and it didn't happen. And of course, here's Jesus. And as like almost every scholar I think that I've had on, from Steve Mason, John Dominic Cross, and even Christian academics like Ian Mills and others said, they expected it, but it didn't happen. It's like, yeah.
You want to see some of these failed end times, or do you want to wait for play some more of the clip?
Well, I could continue the clip, or we could. I felt like we could keep going, but I guess there are moments to give. Here's my bone to pick with what Ruslan was saying, and I hope he's still in the chat. Everyone, you can disagree with him. All I ask is that we're being respectful in the sense that don't be derogatory. Do not be, you can disagree, you can debate, you can go back and forth, but I do not want us to be treating people derogatory, please.
Yeah, just don't be nasty or call music. I got to just put something I just want to share for 2 seconds real quick on the bottom.
Okay.
So just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, like already in the first century, there's, like you mentioned, this Essene sect, talking about the end of days. But like, these aren't just random people on Twitter, for example, talking about end times. These are the church historian. These are the most like educated minds in the church. Julius Africanus, Hippolytus, Irenaeus, Gregory of Tours. These people all had these end dates mapped out using and you actually read these stuff. They'll tell you where they got it from the Bible. Some sort of numeral, like you mentioned, Pope Sylvester in the year 1000. It's like, this is it. 1,000-year reign is over. Jesus is coming back. Revelation even says after 1,000 years, Satan's going to come back up. Sure, everybody thought this was the real deal, and sure enough, it didn't happen. And look, and since then, it's been all these failed end dates. Here we are, 2,000 years have gone by. People are still saying, any day now. And they'll continue to do that for the next 1,000 years. So
right, and it will continue until either apocalypticism,
until climate change kills us all.
I almost feel like that still isn't it, because cognitive dissonance kicks in and people keep retiming, redating, finding ways to keep. There's something really deeply psychological about apocalypticism or eschatology, really, because there's a difference between apocalypticism and eschatology, even though they overlap in some cases.
And because we live in a universe that's not certain, like there is no like certainty of the future. No one knows, like anything can happen. Black hole can show up. Like we do have a weird that might have something to do with why people are like that. The uncertainty of the future is kind of crazy if you think about it.
I think Jonathan Z. Smith has some really deep insights about why people came up with eschatological takes of the end, hoping that God would come in. But it's usually the person who's subordinate, the ideology of the people that are subordinate under the pressures of a regime, an empire, something like that, that has them in a bad situation. It's like your weakness becomes your strength. Okay, keep hurting me. Like martyrology, the idea of like going through suffering actually is going to be a reward. It's going to be turned against the enemies at some point. So this is something that even Christopher Hitchens, I wanted to play that clip where he was debating Frank Turek, and he brings up the most devout believers who are basing their stuff off of the scriptures and how it's a death cult kind of mentality. Like they are anticipating and hoping that the enemies of God and the enemies of his people will be annihilated in the end. Maybe people convert, maybe people will change, but if not, bring heaven with its sword and fire and, the whole nine, like take out the enemy. Mentality.
You remember how that power that you felt when you were saved and everyone else wasn't.
Yeah.
I remember what that was like, walking around like I was one of the chosen elect of God. My humble self that just came out of prison for being addicted to drugs for 10 years and went to prison and look at me, I was chosen amongst all these proud people with their good jobs and families, and they're going to college, and they're all proud in those things, and those are the earthly things, and I'm chosen. I am the only begotten son who is now returning home for the first. Like, that gives you power.
Right.
It does. There's power in that. It feels good. I remember that shit, dude. I'll never forget it.
Power in kind of, like I said, if you, I've heard it explained where women who've been captured by men, we've caught like people trying to escape homes, and they finally get out after a decade of being trapped in some guy's basement, making babies for the guy. I mean, literally, we've heard the craziest stories. They're completely helpless. They're in a helpless state of mind. They have to internalize some way to cope. That is where that spawn of eschatology and apocalyptic mindset comes from, is what a lot of these scholars are saying. So don't worry, asshole, you're going to get what's coming to you. That kind of, situation where God's going to come in and rescue me. I understand it sucks for me now because the brain can't make sense of what's happening. It cannot just, it's not that easy. And so Martyrology, we see it with the Maccabees, the Jews, and the situation that they were in. They kind of turned it into a weapon of, and my suffering is actually my good. And this is what we see in the church.
And even on the Greek side, where you had like Socrates and Aristotle, both of them are at odds with the religious leaders of their time. Socrates obviously goes on trial and drinks the hemlock. Aristotle has to flee Athens and commit suicide. And those are the masters of Athens at odds with the Eleusinian priest. So, and they're going against the grain of their time, getting charged with importing false gods and atheism and stuff. Right. But those people become legends, and people look back, and there's always like this idea of the truth is always at odds with the world. I like the good, all the greats were all martyrs. Like they were all going against the evil, wicked kings and tyrants of their times. There's that. It's like a thing. You know what I mean? It's part of the culture.
Real quick, Ruslan in the chat said that toward the end, and I do remember this. Am I sharing? Yeah, I'm sharing. Let's see. I'm not going to play this whole thing, right? Right here, he plays more noises. These noises get people, like I know some guys that have wrote me about how they're terrified. What if I'm wrong? Like, no matter what right now, they're trapped in this psychological thing of thinking, but what if they're right about this? What if Jesus really rose from the dead and therefore I'm going to hell if I don't believe, that kind of thing? They probably couldn't watch something like this because they're already terrified as it is. And so they're seeing counselors. Here's the guy casting out demons from a person. Oh, you can't get rid of me and things like that. More noises in Israel or Jerusalem. Trumpets, fires, and some of this stuff reading from Revelation, when you're reading it, notice it's contemporary stuff on this ancient text. And so people are interpreting this. This was my critique. People are interpreting this as if this is the path it's going. But Ruslan said toward the end, and I do recall him saying, like, hey, there's fanatics. Let's go over here.
Tell me what you think about this. My hypothesis is people who are into this sort of...
You hear that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's cool.
Sorry. And I don't know.
So the people who are into this stuff, he is being critical, right, of this. So let's hear him out.
As people who are into this sort of stuff are probably Jesus curious. I don't know if they're fully saved.
That's cool.
And I don't know, and I would bet money that they're not in a local church with a pastor and any type of accountability and any type of community that disciples them.
Definitely not.
I would put money on that.
Agree on
100%. I
It's
knew
more of-
one of the first people I ran into.
Oh, go ahead.
It's more of like a QAnon thing. People people just reading the Bible on their own. Kind of, they're like, they might have some weird Gnostic shit going on. Like they're a little bit of a heretic. You know those people I'm talking about. I agree with him on what he just said. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I don't think he's saying everybody who thinks the end is near, but I think that the people who really latch on to this stuff, I got to admit and agree with him on this. You don't even have to be a Christian. I bet you just socially, in America, people have a doomsday mentality. You don't even have to be a Christian. You're going to walk up to somebody thinks this and that connects to some conspiracy dot that connects to the book of Revelation. And they don't even believe, but they have this eschatology. I imagine these are the people that he's specifically talking about. I imagine. because this is a social phenomenon.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, how many Christians do we know and have heard about and today are still actually thinking, and they're like active Christians who do go to a church, who are part of a community of believers that teach this stuff? How many do you think? I mean, there's a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty prevalent. But let's continue what he's saying here.
To like this was a Brazilian dude in my old complex, and he'd walk around with his super old dog, super sweet guy, and he's like, I'm Christian. He's like, oh man, like I love Jesus. Like, do you know
Talks
God?
about the church, not being in the church.
Bang bang, so because they got to keep their jiu-jitsu gym open. But I'm just like, man, that's brutal. I was like, oh, that's crazy. What church do you go to? He's like, church isn't for me, but the
church is right here.
The bang bang, you know, I do all my own study.
So I think this is a stream. I'm catching a video. I don't know where I'm missing the streams to the larger plot of this entire discussion.
I get what they're saying from that perspective, because I remember when I was attending my church twice a week. I had the key. I was the first one there. There was this mentality when you meet Christians that are not going to church. You almost had it almost felt like they were a little bit like wild cards. They were like they were like coming up with things on their own, very independent of what like an organized. Depending, it doesn't matter what church you're in, like whatever, like if you're Calvinist or you're evangelical or whatever, Catholic, like they all have their own organization, how things are done. And it's like, but when you're not going to, when you're not part of a church, you just kind of just believe it. You're like, Trump's the Messiah. Trump's the next, like you could just do whatever because you have your own beliefs. You just plug and play,
There's a lot of that. I don't know
the scientific community.
Ruslan saw my video yesterday where I had Professor Robert Cargill, who's an archaeologist, come on to talk about what was in Sodom and Gomorrah story. But that video, I got to give him, once I assess what he's meaning here at the end of this particular video in the second coming, I'm still left wondering, okay, maybe some of that's sensational. And even Ruslan saying, hey, some of this may not be the case. What is the case? And maybe I'm missing the stream where he answers this question as a Christian. What is his position?
He would call in just now if you wanted him to.
Do what?
But I don't know if you have this set up for that.
I could. Yeah, absolutely. Hold on. Let me send you the link. Hold on. Let me send you the link. I'll text it to you because I have your number. And that way you can pop in here and explain yourself. Wait. Ladies and gentlemen, give me a second here, and let me figure out how to send this link.
I'll comment on that while you're looking that up.
Yeah.
It is interesting too how, depending on which sect of denomination you in, how much they take the end times seriously. Like Catholics probably aren't as much like talking about the end is near. Whereas evangelicals, Baptists are more focused on the end is coming tomorrow. Like we're not even going to be here for the next election type stuff. I've heard my pastor say it before. So it also does depend on that too, even from the organized perspective. You have the type of Christians that are on the corner with their signs and they're preaching, they're evangelizing, and then you have the Orthodox and Catholic types who are more about the rituals of going to church and having the community aspect of it rather than the preaching the word aspect of it. And I know there's a lot of arguments that Protestants use for that being, it's all about preaching the word. It's all about going out there and getting people saved, sending people to heaven.
Depends on who, right? Most, I would say, have some form of that, trying to save the world. And what was the point initially for doing that? What was Paul's goal? And if you're seeing Paul as a late Second Temple Jew within his Judaism, Paula Fredrickson would probably say Paul is trying to ensure that end, that apocalyptic eschatological view of the end would come by looking at scriptures that he saw were promising of the nations would come in, that Mount Zion, God, the whole nine would be ruling the earth, and that the nations would come in, the goyim, and his goal is like, let me go to the nations. Let me get the nations, people from every tribe, kindred, the whole nine, and get them to come in and join the movement to be in Christ. He had that particular view, depending on the scholar you talk to.
Right.
Because it's not always so simple. Some say he's doing something radically different that is not within Judaism.
There's that approach that he's duking it out with these Stoics and Epicureans of the day, going to Athens, trying to trying to bring philosophy and trying to show that his way is the superior Middle Platonist way, if you want to call it that. He probably wouldn't say that. He never does say that in any of his epistles. But like, we know what the world was at that time, what was the leading philosophies of the day. And pretty much it was Middle Platonism, Stoicism, Epicureans. And the Christians are responding to that. Like, you can see how the same ideals are sort of woven in the philosophy behind Christianity.
Right.
No?
Yeah, without a doubt. Many academics have said he's a Middle Platonist or he's a Stoic, depending on,
or even what do you call them? The cynics. There's some cynicism happening. Like, Jesus has some cynic.
Yeah, like going day to day, not worrying about anything, just what's in front of you. Like
the wedding at Cana, where he's like, "What does this concern me, woman?" Like, that sounds like some Diogenes of Sinope. Like, he's like, "What do you think?" I'll give you an example. Diogenes of Sinope. They're like, "What do you want us to do after you die, master? What should we do? What kind of burial do you want?" And he said, "You know what? This is what I want you to do. I want you to tie a sword to my hand and throw me into the water so I can fight the fishes." And they're all like, "Huh? How are you going to fight the fishes if you're dead?"
Right.
Exactly. Right. He goes, "Exactly. Why would I care about what happens to me after I die?" I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that Jesus had that cynicism attitude as well, in a lot of ways.
Ruslan, what is up, man?
What's up, guys?
What's going on?
Oh, your audio's coming in kind of.
Is it messed up?
Your audio's it's a little bit like a little bit.
Okay, I'm gonna call from my studio. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
I'm gonna call from my studio.
Cool. Awesome, man. Makes me feel good that he's coming in to talk with us. There's so many things. That I look forward to talking to him about. I think, like I said, outside of our ideas on this, we'd probably get along perfectly fine. We just disagree on this stuff, right? But you're bringing up an interesting thing that I don't think is taught in church, that is taught about the New Testament scriptures. Seeing Jesus as a new Socrates in Luke, understanding how these authors are imitating or even making Jesus the new, better figure, and the genre of the material. Like, people have this notion they need to believe this stuff literally happened, instead of seeing it as lessons, moral teachings, myths. Like, a myth has become a weapon, right, against fundamentalism, because they're talking about it literally being true. And it's become a myth by definition to them is just false. So there's it's either black or white in that kind of idea, rather than seeing it as a lesson or something that you can glean from. You can learn from the ancient literature, Homer's Iliad, Odyssey, you name it. It's sprinkled throughout.
That's why I was trying to, in one of my videos recently, I was pointing out that I think like Pyrrho and Skeptic School, because he ends up moving down to Alexandria right around the time the Septuagint is getting put together. I think there's a big influence from the skeptics on religion.
Right. Like,
it's not just skeptics doubting the validity of the gods, or of like, should we really watch birds? This is what augurs in Rome did. They watched birds fly, and that would tell them a prophecy or something. And there's like skeptics in the 2nd and 3rd century BCE. They're like, this is really, come on, like, we really got to cut the entrails of an animal and check the intestines, and that's going to tell us if we're going to win the war? Is that real? And so I think that type of mentality influences Judeo-Christianity a lot, because like, look at Elijah when he's fighting against the prophets of Baal. He's like, they're cutting their wrists or whatever they're doing. I haven't read it in a while. They like cut their wrists on the fire. Yeah. They're doing all this divination shit. And he goes, that ain't going to work. He said, I just worship the one God, and he signs down fire from heaven. Like, it's like a skeptic approach to the pagan religions of these divination arts, dark arts, stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that Lucian.
My bad.
No, you're fine. Lucian, the poet, 2nd century critic, also of Christianity and other beliefs, he makes these little jabs like, "Why are you going to the graves?" Because it was custom. Interesting book if you want to check it out. It's called. It's about afterlife in like antiquity, Greek, Roman. It goes into the hero cults, the whole nine, from the Greek world into the Roman, and why people would bring food or drink to the funerals, to the tombs, to feed their loved ones.
Right.
Lucian mocked this.
Right.
He mocked it because he's like, so he pretends like there's conversation happening between the ghost of the person. So how are you eating? You don't have a stomach, like doing all sorts of funny things in the ancient world. Okay, here he is.
All right.
Well,
Hey, guys.
Hey, thank you. Look, I want to say thanks for coming in and hanging out with us. I promise we're friendly, even if
Man. Listen, Derek, this is what I will say to you. I will say that you are by far the most gracious and gentle critiquer of my content, more so than a lot of Christian channels.
Really?
So kudos to you for being reasonable and being fair. I did not watch yesterday's video, so I don't know what
it's fair.
Archaeology.
Trust me, it's fair. I'm not being derogatory at all. I am taking jabs at understanding what I think is really going on, but you would do the same back to me, and I think that's fair.
And I'm looking forward to having you on the channel at some point. We'll coordinate that. I just had Tim from the New Evangelicals on, by the way. We did a 4.5-hour stream. I don't know if you know who that is.
I've heard of it, I think.
Yeah, he's like progressive Christianity, though. He doesn't
more of the quote unquote liberal Christians, right?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so real quick. I don't have a lot of time because Zach just came. My editors are very grateful for the praise that you gave them. So just
they do good.
Okay, so first of all, I lean towards a post-millennial position. I'm not sure if you know what that is.
Yes.
Mike Jones from Inspiring Philosophy holds that position, right? So meaning that I lean this way, I don't know, but we view a lot of revelation as already happened.
Right. So you're kind of a partial preterist, correct?
Partial preterist.
That was where I was at. That was where I was at.
Yeah, exactly. And so having said that, what happened was that topic randomly came up in one of our live streams, just like you guys are doing a live stream. Someone said, "What do you think about all the trumpet prophecy?" So everything after 6 minutes is me and Zach ranting about people who are into this sort of stuff, usually aren't in a good place with the local church, usually aren't anchored, usually are obsessed. It's hurting other parts of their life. So this is where we actually all agree on, is like,
so yeah, okay, I gotta say the first 6 minutes threw me off because I'm going,
so this is what we did. So we had this whole like just kind of railing into like all this sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then we come in the next day and Zach is like, dude, let's sauce this up. Like, people are interested into the end time stuff, and let's lean into that with the hope that we give them that last 3 minutes of basically telling them like, hey, don't obsess over this stuff. Get into a local church, get around some healthy people. This is not the way to go. If you're actually listening there, we talk about, I'm one of the only Christian creators online that talked about getting vaccinated, for example, right? Like, because I didn't think it was the mark of the beast. So we actually roast this sort of stuff all the time. The Jonathan Kahns, that whole stuff. So I fall in a very specific camp of where I view eschatology, though if I'm smart, if I'm a good YouTuber, I understand that
you're making content.
People are talking about this. Let's lean into the tension, but ultimately try to drive them back to a healthy view.
Yeah,
we ultimately don't know as Christians. We ultimately don't know. This is my position, and I've had Mike Jones on. I've had all kinds of people, post-millennial partial preterists on to talk about this sort of stuff. And I've publicly disagreed with people that sensationalize this stuff. But when it's an 8-minute video, we're intentionally absolutely trying to get as many people in, get them in the video with the hope of driving them to a more reasonable.
Like I said at the beginning, I can't envy the model. You have, it's a brilliant model. Okay?
It's good content.
If you can't beat them, join them, right?
Let me ask you this. Is your and is you pointing to the fall of the temple? Is that what the text
Yes.
That's what I think. Because I actually think biblically that's what's good, because we know there's no really debate on who the 666 is. Nero.
Sure.
Yep. So we're already leveraged in that.
There is, but that's pretty much what most of the series.
Right. Some people disagree, but then you look at in the 616 in the Latin, it still matches up with Nero in that language. So you're
Right.
like, what's the odds of two different people matching up in the same text? Anyways, once we get there, we're like, okay, now we're already anchored in a time period. We're in the time of Nero,
Yes.
first century.
Yes.
66 is when Nero went to
Yep.
war against Jerusalem.
Yep.
The temple falls in 7. So
Yep.
I think biblically it's accurate to say that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I would lean is like a lot of the post-apocalyptic stuff that we see is actually Jesus pointing people to the destruction of the temple. That's where I lean. I don't know. And another thing, I just want to correct this, Derek. It's not that I'm against people who think deep theologically. I just am not a fundamentalist. I've never been a fundamentalist. Right. I come from the neo-evangelical stream of Protestantism. So think Billy Graham, think Greg Laurie, that world, and not the Jerry Falwell, Bob Jones, which is where Brady comes from. Brady comes from a very fundamentalist, literal 6th day of creation. The Bible is the literal word of God.
I did too.
I believe Jesus is the word of God. I believe the Bible is also the word of God, but in the sense that it's the inspired, inerrant text. I don't view it as all literal. I don't view all of it as a scientific textbook. And so this is where I get a lot of pushback as well, because I don't hold to a literal 6 days of creation, for example. So that's when I push back against Brady, it's because I often see the pattern of radical, hardcore fundamentalists who deconvert because they were fundamentalists. They didn't hold a neo-evangelical historic, like you said, Catholics aren't obsessing over this stuff. Eastern Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox, they don't obsess over this sort of stuff because it's a more robust, in my opinion, a more robust view of the faith. And if you go back to seeing the Puritans and the post-millennials in that world, the Charles Spurgeon, the C.S. Lewis's, the J.R.R. Tolkien's, that's kind of the stream that I'm coming from, not this. But I am going to be shrewd and lean into some of the sensational stuff. Absolutely. Because with the hope that we get people into the... That's right. That's right.
We were just saying this at the beginning, so we're on the same page. I have to title stuff certain ways.
Absolutely. And this is a good stream. You titled this well. You made a great thumb line. I'm not taking offense to it. I think you got me here. People are sending it to me.
Eye? I got
it's genius with the it's great. So you get it. I get it, right? But I just wanted to clarify that because I think so, and that's what me and Tim just talked about. Like, hey man, the overlap of fundamentalism and neo-evangelicalism has done this, and it's very confusing, but they're very distinct. Calvary Chapel and Greg Laurie are not the same as a lot of the stuff that's hardcore Calvinist, hardcore reform fundamentalism. They're just not the same. They're very different. And even though Calvary Chapel has dropped the ball on some of this stuff as well, Chuck Smith and some of that stuff, but it's a very different stream, how it engages with culture, science, media, all these different things. So I just come from a different stream of it. Some people would criticize that aspect, but anyway, I just wanted to be clear. I didn't want to interrupt your guys' stream, but
no, this isn't. I mean, the stream literally is, we've been bringing up your videos. Yesterday I did the Sodom and Gomorrah. You can't interrupt it. You're like the guy on the thumbnail, but
thank you.
It wasn't, I didn't want it to only be focused on you because I told Neil, hey, bring any videos because there's others who do this, but I did misunderstand this whole video. I read and I watched it. Now I heard at the end some of your criticisms, and I thought, well, where does he stand? Because I didn't get the context. You did a stream, I guess, that wasn't this video on this, and that's where I missed it. But I will say, obviously, on the Sodom and Gomorrah one, I do think that one, like if we played that through, I would disagree with that one.
Yeah, I got to go back and watch it. That was a video of, so I went to Israel recently, and I went to the city of David, and I went to the old city of Jerusalem, which, by the way, my Armenian people still control a quarter of the old city. Shout out to all my Armenians. Right. And I went and I saw a lot of the archaeology and the proof of Pontius Pilate and all these sorts of things. So there's a lot of archaeology to support the biblical narrative. And then that video is me reacting to Pints with Acquaintance.
Right.
Sitting down with someone, and Pints with Acquaintance is a Catholic YouTuber. I like his stuff. People get mad at me because I'm friendly with Catholics. So that's what that video was about, and just reacting to that and pulling up a couple articles. But yeah, it's leaning into tension, creating conflict in those sorts of conversations. But from my vantage point, as someone that just was in Israel a couple months ago, I do think archaeology testifies to a lot of the stuff in the Bible. I would have to watch the rest of your video to
go watch that, because I'm the guy's an archaeologist, and I'm sure he would. Most archaeologists, I imagine, who aren't like going out of their way to try and like make this somehow prove, they would probably be in line with most of what he said. I mean, this geographical region is where there's lots of sulfur already. I mean, it's a natural place where you would have fire. It's like the way I put it yesterday on the stream was, remember when New Orleans came out, everyone said it was the gays in California that caused the flooding?
Yep.
Well, in reality, if there's natural phenomena happening in this region, the explanation is pretty simple. And later in this stream, I mean, we won't have time with you on here, but I'm going to be showing another story that kind of shows you where I think the genre is, like what kind of genre we're dealing with Lot. And if you know, if you're flexible in that kind of thinking, then you might actually say, hey, okay, I think that this is not literal, maybe. I think these, like I said, these places are being mentioned. Look at Pontius Pilate. You were right there at the temple wall, I'm sure, right? Well, not the temple wall, but the city wall right there.
The city wall. We were there
had
at
the
the port
judgment seat,
city,
right?
where his palace was, or the port city. I forgot where that was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right there on the outside is a real nice little natural step up, and that's where he would have judged. If you take the Gospels as this is exactly what happened, then this would have been the spot where Jesus would have been judged.
Mm-hmm.
We're in agreement if this is what is accurately there. What I do is I say there's realisms, what we call verisimilitude, that big word of like people, places, and things are found in literature that is littered with legend or myth and may not fit this is exactly historically what actually happened. So we might approach this completely different in terms of our conclusions, but I do think you're going to find things that match this literature geographically, but you could do that with Homer. You could do that with the Odyssey or the Iliad or Virgil's Aeneid. You can do it with literature that we know we're not reading this as literal, but there's lessons to be learned from this. So I'm not trying to be the atheist that runs around and goes, screw the Bible, or like tries to. I really do think there's some lessons we can learn from the ancients, but I also think that it's being misunderstood.
Yeah, I think there's aspects that I believe are literal. There's aspects and events that I think are literal. And then there's aspects that I think are never intended to be literal. And if you're familiar with Dr. Sean McDowell, I don't know how much of you guys saw with his stuff, but even they just recently did a stream where I highlighted that when we're reading the Gospels are having different perspectives on the same thing. And so even those parables are going to be slightly different. The parable of the talents in Matthew 25 is different than the parable of the talents in Luke, right? And so the Gospels is, I believe, accurate, and I believe reliable, and I believe trustworthy, but they're never claiming to be the literal word for word words of Jesus as much as they're documenting probably what's been passed down from oral tradition. That might be a controversial view for fundamentalists, but Dr. Sean McDowell, Frank Turek, most modern apologists would acknowledge that you're getting different people's perspective. That's why they all read different, and it's not they're not wrong because one omits a detail and the other one puts in a detail, right? And you could go and watch James White and Bart Ehrman debate on the textual. We could go really deep down a rabbit hole, but anyway, I just wanted to call and chat with you guys. I appreciate you being gentle, and you guys genuinely are more gentle than most Christian creators that would critique me. So kudos to you.
Appreciate the compliment. I look forward to when time permits. I tried to run it by the queen, and this year has been just hectic. So maybe we figure out a time where I can come down. We can have this kind of conversation, allow each other to kind of express ourselves and explain where we're at and why. But I think it would make a great episode of somebody who was once, and you could pick my brain and challenge me, and I hope I can go back and forth with you on that.
Yeah, let's do it. I would like that. Cool. All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. I'll let you guys go.
Thanks for coming in, man.
All right. Peace.
All right. Bye. Well, that cleared up some stuff, especially on the eschatology.
Yeah, I mean, it's only fair if we're talking about his video, we let him, voice his own opinion and come in and clarify some stuff,
Yeah.
I respect his willingness to go against some of the fundamentalist, because that's hard to do when you're a Christian. I respect
have so many of your own attacks.
when you're saved, okay. You want people to know it. You want everyone. You're trying to make sure you're not going against what's supposed to be, what we're supposed to be doing. So for someone to say maybe the 6-day creation isn't literal, that's kind of like a controversial thing to believe right now. Maybe not with every denomination, maybe not with every Christian, but if you're if you go deep into these churches, you'll see you're supposed to believe this happened.
Right. I know some right? I think Christians are starting to try and get away from that. More
Yeah,
fundamentalists, of course, aren't. I was a young earth creationist at one point, and I think he made a comment once saying I don't know if he was just saying it off the hip because he's seen a lot of fundamentalists deconvert and become like me and you. So is it the fundamentalism that makes us non-believers, or is it because we can allow so much flexibility to the material to kind of, well, I don't need this to be literal. This can be this. There can be contradictions. And this is one of those things where I think the more you study, the more you realize about this in time stuff. I understand that he's post-mill partial preterist. I was that before I ended up going full-on full preterist, but that's a story in itself. That their expectation, even with Jesus, was that it was going to happen soon in the first century. And all of them, I mean, there were predictions. It wasn't the day or hour. The Son of Man did not even know the day or hour, but the season he gave. And all of the season was related to the temple, which I think was ex eventu, written after the destruction of the temple, kind of like we see with Daniel. It's pseudepigrapha placing itself back in the 6th, 5th century, that's looking 490 years into the future of Antiochus Epiphanes, and it's dealing with what's happened in the 2nd century. And he would just say, no, I think Jesus really predicted it. Whether you think it was written after the temple's fall or not doesn't matter to me. These are really coming back from the mouth of Jesus. That's what I would imagine he would say. We could get lost into those kind of things, but that I asked a scholar who is a Christian, but he's far more liberal on his approach. And I'm not going to mention the name because they actually asked me to take the video down and make it private so they could get employment at a church at the time. Now they're no longer at the church. I don't think they're really concerned about it, but I'm not going to put it up unless they say, hey, put that video back up. And they said Jesus was wrong. Now, I don't know how many Christians, and I don't even know why someone would be one at that point. Like, what would make you want to be a Christian if Jesus was wrong about that? Like, why is one a Christian?
Culturally.
Is it just, I like the way he lived his life? Buddha lived a great, way of living and his philosophy. And is it because you really believe he rose from the dead and you will too one day? Now, if that's the case, that's some literalness that you're expecting and hoping to be true. And if you think Jesus was wrong, why are we thinking he was right or he actually did this over here? And why isn't another explanation better? And that's what I asked off camera to that scholar. I said, look, I'm not knocking your faith. You chose. This is what you want. And I respect that. But if he's wrong on this, I don't know why anyone would be a Christian, no matter if you're a fundamentalist or you're more progressive and liberal in your approach. Is that really a fundamentalist mindset of me to think that if Jesus was wrong about the second coming or the parousia, if he was wrong, wouldn't that make you, like, no matter who you are, second guess Christianity's truth of his claims of being rose from the dead, the whole nine?
Well, can God be wrong?
Depends on if you think he's God in the flesh.
Or maybe you just had this cultural connection to Christianity, and it's and you know what it is. You know what it is. Like, you take it for what it is, and on a scholarly approach, but you just had that cultural connection to it because you grew up in it or something. I don't know. That's my guess.
I don't know. Yeah, I wanted to play that Sodom and Gomorrah video for you, and I got to use the restroom real quick. Is that cool?
Sure.
All right, stick around. We're about to play this one here. And if Ruslan's in the chat, check it out. This is the one that I had serious contentions with. Neil, you might want to pause and comment on it as you go. Actually, you want to share your screen?
I don't think I have the pause.
Can you share your screen and do it?
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Because I'm going to use the restroom real quick just so you can pause and comment along the way.
You want to give me the link in the chat, private chat, so I can go right to it? I don't know where to find it.
Yeah, I got you. Bro. Now, this one, I think, is a little more clearer now that we understand where he was coming from on the whole second coming. But this one right here is specifically, we addressed this yesterday and pointed out in this region, this literally is a natural place where fire erupts often where salt pillars that look like people are there all the time and they develop naturally, things like that. All right. You're up.
We're good.
You're good. Go ahead and play and pause as you go.
Okay.
Community is melting down over the discovery of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is a crazy story, and what I love most about this is any of you guys who've ever been interested in going to Israel, when you go, you will discover the amount of archaeological evidence that confirms different people in the Bible, like Pontius Pilate, different streets that were courts, like David's palace they didn't think existed, and they find it.
So Derek did mention this before, like, if I went to Greece, if I went to, I don't know, like the Hellespontine region, I would find a lot of locations that are mentioned in Homer's text. I might even actually, some scholars think Troy was found. There's a city that was found, Bronze Age city, that got destroyed right around the time when the Trojan War was supposed to be happening. And there's a lot of, not even just a few, there's a lot of scholars that think this is the historical version of Troy. Now, that doesn't mean that the Achilles was literally like, slicing people's heads off and running at the speed of light and doing all types of gods, because, he's like a demigod, basically. That doesn't mean that's true, but it could be the case that, some of this stuff in Homer is based on real places with some real historical stuff that's being legendized. So that's my first thoughts. Sodom and Gomorrah, me and Derek went through there. I think there's like some sulfur there, like it's naturally in the place. And so my thoughts are that the biblical authors describe that to some sort of event happening. So this is obviously, it's not like people are writing this as this. Let me just play the clip. We'll get to it, actually.
It is beyond fascinating, all of the amazing archaeological discoveries that just happened within the last 20 years, okay? And so this story is much like that because it perplexes the scientific community. Be like, oh, there's no way that could have happened. That doesn't make any sense. How could that biblical story be true? That's just a fantasy. And sure enough, there is now archaeological evidence that Sodom...
Pause. All right, so you can see my contention.
I know where he's going with this. I'm interested to hear it before I start commenting.
I gotta make one comment, though, just that's important, because there is this us versus them kind of tribalistic people who are wanting this to be literally true, wanting this to have happened. And he expressed that here. That's what I was saying the difference may be. The last video, I may have jumped the gun, but then again, he admitted, like I would, right? I mean, I'll have something, I might play it and hype it up, but my position, I'm going to be very skeptical of a lot of these claims. I just try to have that, extraordinary claims, extraordinary evidence. It needs to match when the claim is significant, but it isn't ridiculous when you look at Homer. Like, I keep using other texts. They have places, real places, Troy, a real actual city.
That's what I said.
You can say, but did Achilles really, with the help of the gods around and Hector, did they really face off here? And this is where this actually happened. He thought his brother was in the fight with him, but he was deceived by one of the gods or goddesses. And they made him think that he had his brother helping him against Achilles. Like, so my point is just because there's places, just because we found Pontius Pilate's judgment seat. Now, I don't want to sound like that, hand waving, like this isn't a significant thing. It's very significant that we find people in history, that we find places. But to make the leap, and I see this with Christian apologists on Acts, well, there was this actual guy who ruled for 3 years in this particular place, and he was actually titled this, and we have external evidence to prove it, or archaeological finds. What that does is it tells you a lot about the author, and it tells you a lot about their knowledge or the sources they might be using in order to gather that information. But therefore, handkerchiefs are raising the dead, or people are walking on water, or guys are floating up into clouds into heaven. All you have to do is turn the page to another source, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, or Livy, or Ovid's Metamorphosis, or any of this other literature surrounding Suetonius. Look at the portents of Suetonius.
Yeah, that's a good example.
I mean, I love this one. I always reference this one, but the deified Augustus birth narrative looks awfully like that in Matthew. And I was talking to Jeffrey Tripp last night, who's a great academic. I'm having him on soon to deal with the McGrew undesigned coincidence arguments. And he's a mathematician. So he is actually one of the very few guys who was part of a project in New York on Bayesian probability and how to utilize this properly. He sees flawed, how she's approaching this is flawed. And I'll let him explain it when he comes in this coming up week, where we're going to interview on that. But the birth narrative pretty much has portents, just like Jesus has portents, everything down to the Senate wanting children that year to be killed so that they weren't raised up in case the prophecy were true about this child. And who do you know it was? Caesar Augustus. Just like you had Jesus, you have Caesar Augustus, Herod's trying to kill the newborn infants. Well, we have the Senate trying to kill the newborn infants. And it goes on and on and on. So is it true? Is this true? Literally happen? Is this birth narrative not in a long line of legendary, inventive, creative things about authors that do this about men that they thought were amazing, and therefore they wrote these legendary accounts about them? This is what I think it does. So places do not equal divine. If someone wrote about the floods down in New Orleans, and then someone in some text said it was because people in same-sex relationships in California caused this region, which is not California, kind of funny how that God's judgment didn't strike there, it struck over here in New Orleans. That's why New Orleans got flooded when that hurricane came and there were floodwaters and all that. And it's like a natural phenomena occurred. And in a place where natural phenomena like that happen from time to time, I would say even more prevalent in the Dead Sea, for what you would expect this narrative to say about the fires that came and such. And that was explained in our live stream. But it gets even juicier, Neil. This whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing gets juicier.
That's
because
good.
I want to share something that I think is important. And this tradition of Ovid's Metamorphosis, which is a Greek, you're dealing with Roman.
Oh, Ovid's Latin. Ovid's Latin.
I'm sorry, Roman, but it's actually sourcing from Homer.
Sure,
So
sure.
Ovid, here, I'm going to share my screen.
It's retelling all the Greek legends into Latin. That's what Ovid's basically doing.
This text, Philemon and Bacchus in Ovid's Metamorphosis. So here he says, where did Ovid find the Philemon Bacchus tell? It first appears in the Metamorphosis, and no other classical author tells the story. A comment by E.J. Kinney can provide a starting point for a discussion of its background. Onto a folktale originating apparently in Asia Minor, he, Ovid, has grafted a literary motif inherited through Callimachus from Homer, the reception of a great personage in a humble dwelling. It is possible, though, perhaps not very likely, that the grafting was the work not of Ovid himself, but of an earlier writer who was Ovid's source for the story. And then, so these are scholars who are talking about it. Well, what the heck does Philemon and Bacchus have anything to do with this? If you go and check out, you could get the book Ovid's or Argonauts of the Desert. Philip Wadenbaum, I always butcher the name, it's German, connects this. And it's not his idea, but it's an interesting parallel between what happens with divine beings, that their identities are hidden. Like people don't know they're divine beings.
Oh, by the way, with Mercury and Jupiter hiding their disguise as mortals and coming and finding a house where people give them hospitality. There's you can argue that the book of Tobit, one of the apocryphal Old Testament texts, is a lot like this, where these two angels, and they don't know who they are. They don't know they're angels. These two random men show up at their house and they give them hospitality and they feed them, and all of a sudden they find out that it's angels of the Lord. Like, yeah, and I'm looking at this. I haven't read this yet, but I'm seeing whoever wrote this has got more examples than just the two that I just named.
Oh, look, it's insane, because what I'm saying, whether you take a connection, genetic or somehow culturally, that these stories are floating around in the Greek world, which would have had its Proto-Indo-European language. So, and look, this is why I'm a big fan of scholarship. Bruce Loudon's work, right? He does think there's some type of genetic connection between Homer's Odyssey and the Near East. He goes into it. It's way more complicated than I can get to on this stream. And I plan on doing a video. Once I've digested this content, I plan on explaining that. But look at this story, okay? Look at these connections between Lot and what's happening with this Philemon and Bacchus. And then he obviously goes into Orpheus and Eurydice, and I guess this is Cinyras and Myrrha. There's a swamp not far from there, once inhabitable land, but now the haunt of diving birds and marsh-loving coots. Jupiter went there, disguised as a mortal, and Mercury, the descendant of Atlas, setting aside his wings, went with his father, carrying the, what is this, caduceus?
Caduceus, yeah.
1,000 houses they approached. This is interesting. Remember what happened with the divine beings who go down into Sodom and Gomorrah. 1,000 houses they approached, looking for a place to rest. 1,000 houses were locked and bolted, but one received them. It was humble, it is true, roofed with reeds and stems from the marsh. But godly Bacchus and the equally aged Philemon had been wedded in that cottage in their younger years, and there had grown old together. They made light of poverty by acknowledging it and bearing it without discontent of mind. It was no matter if you asked for owner or servant there. Those two were the whole household. They gave orders and carried them out equally. So when the gods from heaven met the humble household gods and stooping down past the low doorway, the old man pulled out a bench and requested them to rest their limbs. Pause. In antiquity, the most important thing you could do to a stranger was show hospitality.
Right.
The sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was not guys trying to hump guys. The sin was inhospitality. You see this later in the Bible as it discusses the Sodom and Gomorrah story. But the thing people latch on to is these men wanted to have sex with these angels. That's what people latch on to.
You can see how a story like this in the Iron Age would make sense. In a world where people are traveling from town to town, it takes a long time. You might run out of water. You might be thirsty. You might be hungry. You finally get to this next village, and what do? You gotta, and you can see how a story like this would sort of like mold into society and help improve society in a way where people are being like, oh, here's a traveler from the road. Let's let him inside. We give him some of the vegetables that we have back, something like that. You could see
like an ancient golden rule too, in a way. There's probably some type of superstition that you're entertaining a divine being, but the golden rule kind of idea of like, you don't want to be that guy who's trying to make it and you're stuck trapped out here in this wilderness and nobody's opening the door to give you water. Nobody's allowing you to sit and rest your legs and sleep for a night. So this was like the moral code. And it was such a moral code that we today would frown upon the things said in the biblical account. Lot offers his 2 virgin daughters to get the crowds to chill. So it's like, okay, well, that's obviously not our modern compass of morality. We wouldn't offer our 2 daughters to chill the people on the outside. We have a different code, I imagine. But the point is in hospitality. So he goes on. So while over the bench, Bacchus threw a rough blanket. They had a goose, the guard for their tiny cottage. As hosts, they prepared to sacrifice it for the divine guests, but quick-winged, it wore the old people out and for a long time escaped them, at last appearing to take refuge with the gods themselves. Then the heaven-born ones told them not to kill it. They said, "We are gods, and this neighborhood will receive just punishment for its impiety, but to you we grant exemption from that evil. Just leave your house and accompany our steps as we climb that steep mountainside together." Ovid Metamorphosis. This is, some scholars would say it's a theoxamy, but others would say it's kind of the idea of hiding the divine people, or hiding their disguise, hiding their identity, and they're over there entertaining them and don't even know it. The point about this is Ovid's writing a fable. It's a story. And it goes on and on. He compares this as well. The 2 angels came to Sodom. We know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. You can go. Here's what Vajimam says. The stories are, again, extremely close. 2 angels, or 2 gods, 2 divine beings. The 2 were 3 in both previous stories. Because remember, the 3 approached Abraham, and he then realizes he's talking to a god and feeds them and such. Then he tells him, you're going to have a son named Isaac. And he chuckles, or she chuckles in the tent, and he names him Isaac, or they name him Isaac. The whole story is that they're entertaining 3 divine beings. The same is the case in the other story. They come to visit a city in the guise of humans, and a pious man offers them hospitality. In Ovid's version, the details of the meal are described. The angels, gods reveal themselves and explain how, due to its inhabitants, the city will be destroyed, but that the pious couple will be spared and allowed to flee with them. In Genesis, the inhabitants of Sodom act perversely. They want to know, which is usually a euphemism for sex, the guest of Lot, meaning to rape them. Here, the descendants of Canaan are accused of inhospitality. Lot is ready to give them his own virgin daughters. We must keep in mind these details in Genesis 19, for they appear again in the story of Gibeah in Judges 19. I think that's the one where he like puts the prostitute out and like all night long. I think that's the one where she ended up getting killed. He ends up cutting her into pieces and sends her off.
That's Judges. Yeah, and so what you just said, it's sort of similar where they come they're from the tribe of Benjamin. Actually, they're not just random people. They're from the tribe of Benjamin, which is odd. Which is what you're wondering, like, was there some political thing going on at the time when they wrote this? Anyways, these people from the tribe of Benjamin show up, and they're like, give us their daughter. And he's like, oh, instead I'll give you the slave woman that came with the priest. And the priest won't even know. It's okay. Just make sure you bring her back in time. I'm just adding that part in. But anyways, the priest rides all the way home with her. And then somehow they don't even explain how. When the next passage is, when the priests discover what happened to her, what does he do? Oh, are you okay? Oh my God, what happened to you? He chops her up into 12 pieces,
right?
And then mails all the 12 pieces out to all the 12 tribes of Israel to go, look what Benjamin did. And that's what
they blame
Benjamin. The huge war against Benjamin happens right there.
It's definitely not a pretty picture. Obviously, I don't think it's historical of what actually happened, but. And this goes a lot with the scholars we have on, right? They're pointing out like this may reflect the ancient Near East, but a lot of this stuff seems to be just narratives that are being constructed, sometimes ad hoc or really post hoc, in light of the larger narratives of the empires that were in control. So you're going to have realisms. I guess you're going to see things that are real places, real activities that would have been understood as practices in the ancient Near East. This story, though, that I'm just pointing out, and it goes on and on. The list goes on and on and comparing them. I highly recommend people look at the comparisons between Lot and what's going on here in Ovid's Metamorphosis. Whether or not there's a genetic connection or not, it's fable. And the Greek Roman authors are quick to say, hey, this is a story. This did not happen in the literal sense, but these are stories that we have. These are our legends, traditions, and stuff. You're looking at that genre. They categorize it as a fable. These are a genre in the ancient world that we know what it is. We see several other examples of it. We get to the Bible. Now we need to see this as somehow historical. We need this to be truly what happened. And I know several Christians who are more progressive, who are being honest and saying, you know what, it looks, and I use this analogy a lot, it gets me into trouble with apologists. It walks like a duck. It talks like a duck. It smells like a duck. It looks like a duck. And what I mean by it is this one's a duck, meaning fable or legend or not literally true. It's a fun story. And this one, when I say you see all of this, and then you get here and you go, but this one had to happen, or this one happened. That's what really, I guess, bothers me, because I don't think it's being honest.
Sure.
I just don't think it's not bothering me to the point where I'm like, have an enemy off of it. It just, I want to tell you why I think that's dishonest. I want to be very frank in saying, I don't think you're being true to the literature. I'm being more accurate with this material than I think you are. That's the point I'm trying to get at.
There's that element of wanting it to be true too. So
right. I remember we brought this up. Peregrinus, the philosopher who was a Christian, 2nd century AD, he goes and he had reached his peak of philosophical. I can't remember what the technical term is, but he's like, that's it. I'm going to show you how much I've made it. He goes to kill himself by burning himself on a pyre, commits himself to the flames. Lucian's walking back. He gets bothered by several people. What happened? I heard Peregrinus, da 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 da. And Lucian writes, well, I decided to throw a little curveball here and there, and say, hey, when he died, out of the flames came a phoenix bird that flew up and ascended to Mount Olympus and blah, blah, blah. The next day, some old man approached him and said, I saw the bird that ascended to Mount Olympus from his flames. And Lucian writes, now, whether this is historical or whatnot, whether this really happened, he said, my own lie got believed in one day.
Well, you mentioned Suetonius's Life of Augustus when it talks about his death, and he says in the text, we have multiple eyewitnesses that saw his ghost rise up into the sky. So he's trying to make it believable. You know what I mean? Like there's that people need to believe this element.
There is. I do think there is a part of, I don't know if everybody fits the same category in antiquity.
Right.
I imagine the elites murmured amongst themselves, that's a fable. Like none of us buy that. You
get with Vespasian's life, where the author, or I think is it Tacitus or Suetonius, says, I have no reason to lie. Like he prefaces the sentence with, I have no reason to lie, but here's what happened. A man walked into the temple. His name was, I think he says his name is Basilides. His name was Basilides, and he had a lame arm. And Vespasian reached out and touched him, and his arm grew, and he was, and he healed him. And but he prefaces it with, I have no reason to lie.
I talked to Jeffrey Tripp, and I'm seriously trying, and I mean this. I want to be fair. And then let's get to some super chats here, because I heard there's some funny ones in here that
you still want to play that video? I think we were about to play it too, right? Or no?
I did interrupt it, but dude, it boils down to, he thinks that this confirms the biblical account. And in one way, it confirms that the geography in which this narrative was constructed plays a significant role in the type of story. The book that I talked about yesterday, bear with me, there it is. The cities that built the Bible, Robert Cargill, who's the archaeologist who talks about this, he gets into Sodom. He gets into several stories all the way down into Jerusalem. Really interesting book. Shameless plug to my boy, Robert Cargill, who's over Iowa. But the point is the narratives have their geographical significance, whether it be Galilee, whether it's the Dead Sea. There's a reason. Think about this. There's a reason why. You can look at it two ways. The believer Christian who wants this to be literally true, those pillars of salt that you and me drove by in Israel when we were there, those are probably humans. It wasn't just Lot's wife that might have turned to salt. How many other wives of husbands turned into salt over time? Therefore, this geography actually proves the truth of this story. Or what most people would say is common sense is, and they would say it's common sense. The scholars who are investigating this will say it's clear that this story was the imagination of the narrator is being inspired by the geography of this place and probably natural phenomena.
They're seeing the same places and same salt piles that we're seeing right now.
Exactly.
And then they're saying there might be some local legends arising in that region about the salt pillar being somebody's wife. All of a sudden that gets put in the text, gets rewritten, repurposed, boom, done.
Exactly. And this happens a lot. So notice I said lot. But seriously, the whole pillar of salt, there are natural formations of salt that literally get up to 6.5 feet tall. And Dr. Cargill goes into that and points out. The other thing is gases. I think he mentioned there's a place where they actually would scoop up the what do you call that they would waterproof their boats with?
Oh, asphalt.
Yeah, we might call it asphalt, but there's a particular word that they used, and he said it yesterday in the stream. All of this stuff's just natural.
I think that's what it's called, because I think that's what the Vespasian or the Josephus's
pitch.
Yeah.
Yep, pitch. Thank you so much for that in the chat. That's exactly what he was saying yesterday. Natural pitch. There's gases coming out of the earth and fire that comes. Can you imagine if we found pottery that melted in this area where these natural phenomena happen all the time? It's like the flood scenario I said about New Orleans. Therefore, because floods happened here and a story said that God sent a flood here, that means that the God actually sent a flood, or humans are perceiving natural phenomena and putting them into stories.
Right.
That's
Especially,
where I think
especially a region like Mesopotamia that does flood.
facts.
Why
Or
wouldn't-
Egypt.
Yeah.
Egypt and the Nile.
The Nile, right.
No doubt. No doubt. So you can say all the natural phenomena are your God, or you could be consistent. And I think this is where the consistency comes in. We need to thank the Mesopotamian deities when they've done something good. And when things are sent, it was that God, not your God. It was that God that did it in that case. And then it was your God that did it when it's noted in your book about your God, if you're going to be a supernaturalist who thinks this stuff's all true. I just think there's no consistency on once you open that worldview of miraculous and divine beings interacting with the human world. This is my problem. Be a supernaturalist. Make sure you give credit to all of them. You're playing games when you do this stuff and act like it's just yours and all the other stuff is not true. And yours looks much like the other stuff. The genre, the kind of material, the mindset, the archaic morality, the archaic understanding of the world we live in. And that evolves over time. So I think I've preached long enough on my position. Do we even need to play that?
It's up to you. It's up to you.
I figured super chats. We got 19.
I think we sort of gave our thoughts on. We know what he's gonna say. Like, I hate to say that. I hate to be like, but like we don't. It's up to you. We don't have to play it.
I played. I didn't play it yesterday because he already watched it. But
yeah,
I do encourage people to watch that and then watch our live.
Yeah.
And then hear an archaeologist who is coming at this. Various cities in antiquity. In the Bible, in some cases, has that line up. And then in some cases, they don't. And I recommend Joshua Bowen's books on some of this material that he shows, because he sifts through vast amount of scholars. And then, like, I always analogize it to the bird bringing the worm to the chicks. He's chewing the heavy, hard linguistic stuff that academics are writing in their dense books and making a popular level version of it. The other
I have to hope that my translation that I find online is correct, because Akkadians, there could be like 10 different translations that all say 10 different things. But I go look them up. I try to find one. I'll look to see who translated it. And it's from 1950. All right, let's check it out. Like, who cares? Like, I'll just go with it. But like, that's a whole different world. Like,
dude, shameless plug for Dr. Kip Davis here. 18 lecture course. 4K. You can sit and chew it as you go, like at your own pace. MP3, it's in 4K. So he's going through visuals, giving you, actually teaching you and taking through the ancient Near East. Anyway, there's a shameless plug.
Deep.
I had to do it. I guess I should put it's in the description.
You're not going to find anywhere deeper going into the Dead Sea Scrolls than this course.
Not just Dead Sea, ancient Near East that's leading up to the material in the Dead Sea and stuff. So, like, how does apocalypticism come on the scene? Who is Yahweh, Elohim, El in the ancient Near East, and how these peoples understood their world? So it's a great way to get immersed and chew on it and understand what's going on from a scholarly perspective. All right. Super chats here, Neil. Constellation. We know this person, I think. Huh.
Great friend of both of us.
They said, I've given up talking about religion to people. I'm shocked how little Christians and half-assed ones don't hardly know anything. One even denied the chronology that goes back to Adam's creation. I was so disappointed. I just don't bother anymore. What's your take on that?
He's fed up. He's tapping out. I get what he's saying. I do. Like, I bet. I'm not gonna lose sleep over what someone else believes.
Right.
There's so many people that believe so many different things that doesn't really bother me. I'll engage with people. Like, I engage with inspiring philosophy on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
We go back and forth and message each other or comment on each other. Like, at the end of the day, I don't hate them or anything. We're friends. We get along. We just disagree. And I might even get a little bit like, a little little snappy on him, like, come on, dude, this is I'll say like this is delusional.
Right.
I'll say something like that, but I don't mean nothing bad by it. I'm just that's just how it is. He's fine.
I get it.
Yeah.
In real life, well, I don't drink, but I could imagine you and him having a beer. You know what I mean? Like that
course.
kind of thing. But at the end of the day, yeah, I totally disagree on these things. I wouldn't. It sucks because you can see the chip on our friend's shoulder here, and I would encourage trying not to have walls up against anyone who has beliefs in things. People are going to believe in things. And it's just my little encouragement. As far as the consistency goes, though, on that chronology, the genealogy going back to Adam, yeah, the Bible paints it that way. This is why you have people who come in who are trying to realize there's problems between Genesis 1 and 2 and the accounts of Adam and then the genealogies. I got chewed out. Let me give you an example. I got chewed out. I mean, probably 50 comments under my Enoch video because I said Enoch was a descendant of Cain. However, there's another genealogy the next page over that says that Enoch was a descendant of Seth. Well, Derek, which is it?
And that's because of the documentary hypothesis, I'm guessing.
Well, just it's fragmentary. It's clear there's different sources going on here.
Yeah, it looks like there's another genealogy happening in the next one. You're like,
right.
Why do these names look exactly the same? What's going on?
It's clear.
Yeah.
I fact checked this with Dr. Kip, Joshua Bowen. They look, yeah, you're not wrong. It's clear he is and he isn't.
Right.
Because you just go to one and they're almost identical genealogies, two different sources. And I'm like, listen, I'm on the side with the scholars here. I could have probably spelled it out a little clearer and said, look, in one genealogy, he's a son of Enoch, a descendant of Cain. In the other one, he's a descendant of Seth. The problem is you get later, and in the book of Enoch, you're going to find that he is a particular descendant of Seth. I think. I'd have to fact check that. But
I'm pretty sure you're right.
I just went with the Bible here and went with what one of these said, and I didn't do a good job of spelling that out. Point is they're finding Adam wasn't the first human Homo sapien. So now you have guys like Michael Jones who are accepting of evolution. They do accept the sciences here, and they go, yeah. Well, now how do we explain Adam? Because a lot of them still want Adam to be a historical dude.
I've heard someone say like evolution played itself out after God's creation, and then one of these or two of the, or I guess maybe one of these Homo sapiens just is the Adam, like becomes Adam in some sort of way.
Right, like God breathed a new one.
God just said that one right there. I'm going to start with this one, and that's going to be Adam, and then it's going to go from there.
He put his spirit finally into some Homo sapien at some point.
But you know what that ends up doing? It gives them another out now, because now they can say, well, there already was humans on this planet. They're just not from Adam or something along those lines. Like that's why, because there's that problem with, wait, didn't Cain leave to go find a wife? Where is he going? Where's all
yeah. And he's afraid. Who's he afraid of? Is Adam going to send his son to go after? Like, there's questions, and then
with that in place, you that solves that issue. Well, there's people.
Exactly. And it's an ancient document, really, with ancient sources that are compiled here. So I get the frustration, because once you nail something down, there's always room and wiggle. I like what Christopher Hitchens once said. Some of his stuff, he's pretty intense sometimes, but he does it in a poetic way where he says, 99 point whatever % of life on earth has literally been destroyed, is dead today. So the creation of this world and the evolution of life, most of it has died. And then finally, in just recent history, God decides to interact and intervene. And it's pretty poetic. I understand that there's always a loophole. And, well, no, he's always been active. But when you think about life, it's really weird. I mentioned this to my brother because he's all into the whole extraterrestrial stuff possibly going on. And I said, look, if life is out there messing with us, there's something to be afraid of. Because what does it take for you and me to be alive? Energy, which comes in the source of food.
Right.
If you look at evolution, life has cannibalized itself to get to where we are.
If we traced life back to its most simplified origins, where you're finally getting like multi-cell creature. They're eating each other. Like if you look at them,
how it's. Yep.
they're eating they're consuming each other left and right to survive, and that's the survival of the fittest. That's what's happening on the lowest levels of life, all the way to the highest levels of life. We have to eat, vegetables and meat to survive. Even with even something like cereal that comes from grain, and that was once a plant. Like everything you eat is a living thing, some sort of living entity.
Right. Or I mean, most of it is. Yeah, I can't.
Which is what evolution is.
That's the scary part. And then when you get to Genesis, here's the curse: you're going to be cursed with pain in childbirth. If you take that literal, you mean all primates prior to the pneuma being inserted into this one guy and girl. Well, really the guy, because the girl comes from the guy's rib. And I'm not getting lost in that one. But you take this literal, it's like, come on. It's an etiological myth. Why are we afraid of snakes? I'll tell you why. The story of the snake back in the day.
Well, check, and it's even more clear because when we look at like Aesop's fables and the characters' names are the person's name is lazy, and he's in the story he's acting lazy, right? It's clearly the fable is about what happens to people who are lazy. Well, with Adam, his name has to do with like earth red, like Adam means like earthly red, like he comes from the earth. He's a Chthonian human from the earth. Like he's you can see the name matches what he is. He's a human.
I say the same for Eve. I say mother of the living.
Life.
There's that
bread. Yeah.
Remember Matthew Munger talks about the pun that is in the ancient Mesopotamian narrative where Eve plays into the rib of the earlier mythos. So there might be a linguistic pun happening. Let's keep pressing forward because I got a lot here. Seth of Valhalla. Hi, guys. Ruslan in the comments. Good stuff. Thank you for the compliment. And I'm glad Ruslan came on. So we are going to see some stuff before he came on in Super Chats. Ruslan, it's the sound of Vuvuzela. I don't know. You know that name?
I don't know what that is.
I don't either.
But I'll check it out. I'll have to keep that in mind.
Thanks, Seth. Constellation Pegasus again says it's hard to feel sorry for people that actually believe this stuff, but what can you expect after all the church lies to people when it's all too predictable like this? There's a problem.
He's getting he's had it to hear with these apologists. No, I appreciate the input on this subject because I can see how someone can get frustrated with some of this stuff where you have certain people that are, if you want something to be true, even if it's from a skeptical side, we see this with mythicists. If I want Jesus to not exist, he didn't exist. There's no evidence, and anything you do give me, I'm just gonna write it off as just that's weak.
Right.
So,
I'd say some, right? Not everybody fits.
No, I'm just saying it goes both ways. What I'm saying. It doesn't have to be just theist. It could be atheist. It could be anybody. When you want something to be true, you'll make it make sense.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Personally, I get the frustration of wanting to feel sorry and not feel sorry for people at the same time because I was one of these people who devoutly believed this stuff. So I have to try to empathize, no matter if I think something's foolish. But I also relate to the church not teaching any of this. They don't teach you this material. They're not telling you about the fables. They're not telling you about the myth. They're not telling you about the clear issues with the material. And if they did a better job, and there are several Christians that are obviously not fundamentalists, they're more on that progressive side, who are trying to do that damage control and say, look, you guys keep hiding this. People are going to discover it. And when they do, the bubble's going to pop. And they're going to feel deceived by you, that you're not being honest, you're not being fair, you're not being, handling this material correctly. So I can relate. And Constellation's back again. Maybe it's Godzilla ramping downtown Tokyo and the media is covering it up. Thank you, Constellation, for the love, the support. Just don't beat yourself up. Don't get too upset. Understand, not everyone fits every category. There's so much of a bigger world, and it's not black or white. There's a lot of gray in there. The laughing philosopher, Ruslan, your content matters. Don't just brush it off as entertainment. People believe this stuff and base life decisions on it. Be responsible. So I can respect that. And when I jumped this gun on this video, I was wrong in not realizing what he was trying to do with it. Because, man, it took 6 minutes. 6 minutes of things that I'm thinking he's hyping on. And he came on and admitted it. But I thought he was like sitting on that fence of ambiguity, not taking a conclusion and saying, hey, this is bogus. This is BS. And I misinterpreted it the first go around and watching the video. And then I made the video and we started talking about this. However, I do think I'm drawing proper conclusions pertaining to the Sodom and Gomorrah scenario.
Yeah, I agree.
Lev in the hizzy, Pope Sylvester, suffering succotash, the end is nigh.
That's right. That's right. That's the one. He's the one that really made a big deal about, apparently, according to some sources. You know, he made a big deal out of the end because he was reading the Bible. Revelation says Satan will be chained for 1,000 years, and after that 1,000 years is over, he'll be released, and that's when this war is going to break out between Michael and the angels and whatever. So, yeah, according to the Bible, Pope Sylvester was just being a Christian and doing, you know, giving his thoughts. And didn't.
I mean, they did it every generation.
Every generation.
Like every century passing, this was going on. And there were different versions of Christianity that spurned from this never happening and making realized eschatology, how the Gnostics, or what we call Gnostics, the various forms of these groups that splintered out, they had realized eschatology. I mean, full on realized, not NT Wright level, beyond NT Wright, straight up the resurrection of the dead happened. These kind of versions, the Gospel of Thomas implies that. And so Constellation Pegasus, again, familiar story as always, like Watchtower, we're right. And the whole wide world is wrong. Sad to think about this story will continue on.
I guess that's true. I mean,
there's a lot of that that's going to keep going, but we're trying to educate people.
Yeah.
Get them to stop thinking like that.
Yeah.
By the way,
personally, I'm like if you look at my content recently, I'm coming at it differently now. I'm just trying to bring the material into like an art. I guess art. It's like art. Like I'm bringing you the material in a way where it's like, you know, entertainment. You can watch it, and right. I'm not like arguing anything. I'm just, here's what the text says, and well, I do give my thoughts on things, and I do cite some scholarly stuff, but like, you know, my approach isn't to like fight for one side against the other. If that would make sense.
Yeah, you're more neutral in that respect, but you always have been on your channel.
Yeah,
you've continued to just try to kind of bring these insights, and people wherever they are can just accept it as it is. I do bring a little bit more of a critical jab.
Sure.
I want to get people to think, why would you believe this in the literal sense, of course. So it does leave the room for people who are like, yeah, well, it's all meant metaphors all the way down. Everything's an allegory. Everything's a metaphor. Well, then I should be allowed to read any and every text that way and glean any and every text that way. And why is this one on a pedestal in your mind? Why don't you do this with Homer? Why don't you do this with every writer in antiquity that had these kind of claims in them? And so I feel like we get pushed away from, I can't believe this literal anymore because it seems dumb to believe this literally happened, especially when you compare it and not be consistent. So I think it's allegory. Okay. It's all allegory. All right. I'm willing to swallow that. I mean, I don't know. I feel like that I want to get people to think about this stuff a little bit more.
Yeah.
Gnostic Zeno, should you try to convert Christians, or is it better for them if we don't? If they don't have a replacement, is it mean-spirited to do so?
I'm not trying to convert anybody, me personally. I'm here to engage with you and discuss it with you. I don't want to convert you to anything. I know what you mean by that. Like, should we try to? I get what they're saying. I do, but me personally, I'm not trying to convert. I'm just trying to engage with you and to discuss it, give my thoughts, maybe point you to things that I've seen that made me convinced otherwise, and try to bring that to you and see what you think and get your thoughts. And like, I'm just trying to, that's what I'm trying to be as not biased as possible and try to convert anyone in any different direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I want everyone to burn in hell.
I hope that I'm not. I hope I don't come off as somebody who's not trying to convert people to anything. I mean, maybe I have.
I don't feel like that. I'm sure you might. There's some people who probably feel like you're too critical, right?
Maybe.
For me, I am interested in getting people to think critically, to ask why they believe in something, and at the very least, whether they believe in something at the end of the day or not, get them to understand why people like me don't. Not just hear me out, but do you actually understand? Does it make sense to you? I understand why someone would believe because I was a believer. I understand that mechanic and that feeling, that subjective experience of living a life as a believer. I understand that leap of faith of hoping that one day I will resurrect from the dead as well. But do they understand? And I knew I didn't understand. When I was a Christian, there's no way in hell I would have understood myself. And I always talk about that. If I met myself 12 years, 13 years ago, today, how would that conversation go? So it's a crazy thing to think about, but I'd be probably like, what the hell happened to you, Derek?
Right.
How did you do this? What did you do wrong? Because I couldn't imagine how evil, how wicked of me. What happened to you, Derek? This would be something in my mind. Yep. And it'd be an interesting video to kind of have me interview me, do like a funny hypothetical. Here I am, fundamentalist me, seriously biblical theology, the whole nine.
See if you can load up an old AI version of you or something.
Constellation Pegasus, does this guy believe in a 6,000-year-old Earth and man?
He said, I think he said no.
Yeah, he said no.
And he gets pushback on that, which I don't blame. Like, I don't doubt at all. I don't doubt that he's probably got some creators out there that are, in the young Earth camp that are like, he's worse than atheist because he believes that. Like, I bet you he gets that.
Oh,
I'm just guessing.
Well, you heard the compliment he gave me. He came on and was like, "You're nicer to me than many Christians are."
Right, exactly.
And that I thank you. I mean, I guess it's thank you because it's like, I don't want that, but yeah. I expect that. I already know that. You can see the history of any religion. It's not just Christianity.
I remember the days when our church would talk about other churches, and there was more animosity towards other Christians than there was against people who just or atheists or agnostic, didn't believe. Like, there was more like, why are they in the wrong church? Don't they know better?
Right.
And that's a real thing that's happening. Like, that you see that for sure.
Yeah. It's the difference of small things. I can't remember what they call it specifically, but that is, your biggest enemies are going to be the closest people to you.
Yeah.
That's just the way that the cookie crumbles. If they resemble you and they're in your turf, we got a problem. If they aren't in line with the things that you do. So I actually, just to compliment this idea of being a little bit more flexible as a human and not be so rigorous, I don't think it's consistent with literature I'm reading in the Bible as much. I don't think in some cases the fundamentalists, I think, are actually representing and portraying what the text is saying. That's the problem, is imitating or trying to model yourself after the text. A lot of people are trying to make it mean something that it doesn't mean. And you can do that. Interpretations allow that. You can do that. There's that subjective viewer, reader can make things mean something that they don't. I don't think they're being accurate in their original context, but I would rather the Christian do that than to literally try and say slavery is good. The Bible says so. Or chattel slavery happened and God actually condones how to own people's property. Therefore, we should do that because I have text. And not only that, Jesus doesn't condemn it. He actually has parables where he uses slavery in it. Jennifer Glancy goes into this. So do we go back to slavery being a thing? What do you do? What do you do? We're rambling now, huh? I just wanted to make sure the Lacedaemonian super chat. The next one, he didn't have a comment, or they didn't have a comment. Oh, so they did. Here it is, popping it up, and it was a $10 super chat. I just didn't want to miss it. Christianity in its first 500 years was divided chaos. It came together by force in the late Roman era, then was sliced apart again. It is in a state of divided chaos again. What comes next?
Interesting. Obviously I'm not an expert on church or like the church history or anything, but I do have a little bit of understanding of like the first couple centuries where you had these groups that are later deemed heretics and even called Gnostics, which they didn't really call themselves that. They just called themselves Christians. You know, the Basilidians and the Carpocratians, the Nacenes and the Sethians, and the Valentinians, and then you have all these different schools of Christians all over the place. Marcion's camp, Justin Martyr's over here. You got all these, and they're all they're all Christians.
Yeah,
but they haven't like figured out what they agree on, what they disagree on. So there's this disagreements happening all the way up until the 4th century, and then continuing on.
Yeah.
To 5th and 6th, and they're still doing councils and all this stuff. And then I think even when you have a church, you still have different, you still have these different insiders in these churches. And then obviously when the Protestant Reformation comes out, really everything gets divided up. But like I don't think it's ever was a single camp for Christianity ever.
No, was never one, and there never will be. You can bank on that. So it's an interesting historical question to ponder. And then I would want to do some heuristic stuff and look at other developed religions from their origins on. Look at the Mormons. I love looking at the Mormons. Joseph Smith and the splintering out from the gate. There's actually a graph online, Mormon churches graph from the start. I don't know if that would be what I would be looking at. It's like a genealogical graph that tells you from the start the various churches. We have it. We have Christian sects as well, like Arminianism, this, that. I don't see, and I'm probably not typing in the correct thing, but I love looking at that, the divisions, and it only keeps splintering even further,
right?
More and more sects.
And let me just add real quick: there's this understanding, it's a false understanding. I was one of these people who thought this too when I was a Christian, that they only splinter off after the church. It's like, and before the church, going back to Jesus, it starts getting smaller and smaller, and then like Jesus, Paul, and then it starts to splinter off. But like, no, it's actually the opposite. It's actually the Christians that you can find the most separated, Mormon and Catholic. Okay, they have so many disagreements, but they have more overlap than some of the earliest Christians did. For example, if I took the Carpocratians, compared them to the Ebionites, oh my God, those are two different worlds. Some of them are putting up Pythagoras and Plato as prophets, where over here it's Isaiah and Jeremiah, and there's completely different. They think some groups think Jesus was just a prophet. Some of them think he's like son of God. All these different ideas of who Jesus was. There's way more differences early on than there is now, I think.
That is an interesting point. I mean, right out the gate. And I kind of picture it. Imagine having 12 guys stand around this guy and you end up with 12 sects after the guy's gone. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't, I mean, I'm not saying that's what actually happened.
You're saying hypothetically, who knows? Like, but all we know is when these Christian texts start showing up, they start off all over the place.
Right.
There's no unity in the beginning. It starts off all over the place.
We do not have an early enough material, right, from any inception where they're all just on the same page. We have a story in a book called Acts that tries to paint that they were all one and of one mind and shared all things in common. And that I would call an etiological myth, an origin myth of Christianity. I'm not saying there isn't a kernel of historical memory, that maybe they had a communist community out the gate or something where they were together and had one idea and one thing all in common. But this is a story that I think is being written in the book of Acts. And there's good reasons to think so. Just, I don't see why. Well, there's people, places, and things that are real in the book of Acts. That means that this is all historically reliable and true. And this is what they want to sell you. Ichapod, this is Brady Goodwin. Good to see you, my friend. I was Calvary Chapel for much of my Christian life and not a fundamentalist, as you think, Brady. So Brady's the one writing this. So Ruslan, if you're seeing this and you've watched this far, Brady said, no, clap back. I was not the fundamentalist you think I was. I was a devout theological thinking person. But interesting note, historically, Brady, I was actually in Calvary Chapel and attending that church and part of them right before I went into Christian college. So it was the pastor at the Calvary Chapel who encouraged me to go to get into the ministry, and I went to college and started taking it serious there. So thanks to Calvary Chapel for encouraging me to go down the path I did. Digital Hammurabi, look at these two. Pfft. They don't get that. The earth is flat and only 6,000 years old. I'll bet they even think the Old Testament endorsed slavery.
I quit. You got us. You got us. Let's quit and the stream.
How did he know?
We got to put sackcloth on and put ashes. How did he know? How'd you know?
I mean, he probably has serious mind reading capabilities.
Yeah, that's a prophet. A prophet right there.
For sure. If you're not worshiping Digital Hammurabi, you might want to start doing it. That's a pretty... Right here, you just saw a miracle. Like, how did he know this? There's just no way to explain it naturally. This is completely miraculous. And I'm putting my tithes in. Like, as soon as I'm off, I'm putting my tithes in. In fact, I'm giving back my tithes that he just paid me. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah, that works.
Topic discussed. Member for 16 months.
Wow.
The frightening thing is when they not only want it to be true, they actually try to make it true, forcing the apocalypse. Dude, give me 1 second, Neil. We got to do the Christopher Hitchens part.
Yeah, and while you're pulling that up, I'll just say, like, there's just, it sort of seems like, I think the best analogy would be like puzzles, but like it almost sometimes where the puzzle pieces don't necessarily work out the way you want it to. So you might take the scissors and cut off an edge, or you might draw your own puzzle lines and make it work somehow. Some of the puzzles or pieces are being moved around in a way where it's not really supposed to fit like that, right? And that's how I see a lot of times I see people, and it's like how do I say this? You're looking for the data that you start with your solution. You start with this is what I think is true. And then what you do is, instead of going to like the experts and seeing what they say and seeing if you're right, you're going out and you're looking for certain experts that are aligned with what you believe, and then you'll cite those people, and then you sort of look through the data and then write off things that you don't like and say that probably is an interpolation. That's true because that lines up with what I want. So then you start you're building your data and picking the data that you want to make you look right. And you see this all the time. You see this. I used to do this all the time when I was years ago. I did the same thing.
I'm gonna. So this is a Frank Turek debate, right? Where Frank Turek and Christopher Hitchens are talking about, does God exist? Something to that effect. And I think this is the part. I hope it is. I'm gonna hit play.
Questioners repeats a point from.
Let me see.
So it's an infinitely expanding tautology. It could explain everything.
No, here we go. This is it. Yep.
By chance.
Well, I have two responses to that. One is, what would she have said?
He does say
about the irreducible complexity.
Yeah, just play it.
Well, I'm trying to make sure
it's possible for such structures to.
I thought he was going to say
before she knew about DNA.
The part where the guy's like, why don't you just stay home?
The universe exploded into being out of.
Oh gosh, here we go.
Were thereby correct.
Nope, I messed up and got the wrong one. Let me see where it's at. I'm sorry, I'm doing this. I'm trying to make sure.
I was going to say, I feel bad for the people listening. No, that's okay. I'm just joking. You found it?
Who's heard? Who thinks it's a question I answered poorly, or inadequately, or badly, or failed to answer at all, and would like to challenge me.
Here it is.
If there is no God, why do you spend your whole life trying to convince people that there isn't? Why don't you just stay home?
Can you hear that?
Was the
Can you repeat that?
was the
Oh,
question?
the question is, if there is no God, why spend your life and career trying to refute that? Why not just leave it alone and stay home? Fair enough.
Well, it isn't my whole career, for one thing. It's become a major preoccupation of my life, though, in the last 8 or 9 years, especially since September 11th, 2001, to try and help generate an opposition to theocracy and its depredations internationally. That is now probably my main political preoccupation. To help people in Afghanistan, in Somalia, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Israel, resist those who sincerely want to encompass the destruction of civilization and sincerely believe they have God on their side in wanting to do so. I think maybe I will take a few minutes just to say something that I find repulsive about especially monotheistic messianic religion. With a large part of itself, it quite clearly wants us all to die. It wants this world to come to an end. You can tell the yearning for things to be over whenever you read any of its real texts or listen to any of its real, authentic spokesmen, not the sort of the pathetic apologists who sometimes masquerade for it. Those who talk, there was a famous spokesman for this in Virginia until recently, about the rapture, say that those of us who have chosen rightly will be gathered to the arms of Jesus, leaving all of the rest of you behind. If we're in a car, it's your lookout. That car won't have a driver anymore. If we're a pilot, that's your
And dude, the video goes on and on. Like pretty much, there are people who obviously take this and go all the way extreme. But
Great.
Gary, thank you for being a member, man, and highlighting that. I just had to play it because I thought about that before we even began. I was thinking about playing that clip. The reason to remain in Christianity or in church might as much a desire to stay in communion with a community and not just holding to its culture.
Yeah, I
William
agree.
Arn's been around for a minute.
I agree. I think that's how a lot of people view it. They grew up in it. You see this with Catholics a lot. It's tradition. It's the Roman Catholic. I'm 100% Italian. I grew up in a Roman Catholic. I got confirmed, and they show up. Maybe they go on Christmas and Easter, and they identify as Christian, and they're not online like arguing with atheists. They don't. It's just tradition at that point. And to me, I don't have a problem with that at all. You see that with so many Muslims that their tradition is just Islam, and that's just what. And you see them get lumped in the same categories with fundamentalists, and that bothers me. It almost. I was almost thinking about making a video about that. You see this with a lot of Christians on Twitter attacking people, Muslims and Islamists. They use that phrase Islamist all the time. It's like I'm almost wanting to make a video about it. But anyways, yeah, that's my point.
Yeah, there are fundamentalists in all camps, right?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's trying to be balanced that we're trying to do, but sometimes it hurts people's feelings because they identify themselves with the idea so much, the theology or the belief or the book or whatever. And when you're critical of it, repercussions or enemies are made out of this. And it's like, wow. So if I point out that something I think is man-made and is not divine, that is human, and I want to show that could be a problem. In certain countries, that would be illegal. I guarantee you, I'd be like killed in certain countries. In other countries, there's more freedom to do that. But I still don't see any reason to try and go out of my way to create the hate, you see, or to create that animosity. I want to educate people. So
I agree.
What do you do? Lev's back again. Drew Tang mentioned on BTR with Neil of historical repetitions as signs of synchronicity. Death of Caesar, avenged by Augustus, from death of Osiris, and avenged by Horus, killing of the king ritual.
Yeah, he's pointing out like there's certain tropes in mythology that reoccur in history, and people will map these things onto those mythologies as, for example, Augustus being the new Apollo. You see like certain Roman emperors will be, considered to be a god, like, or even not even just Roman emperors, like Greek kings are called Dionysus or Epiphany. Like you get the saviors and stuff. These tropes apply to these people from the myths onto the people.
So another way of saying it is because there's certain common repetitive behaviors and practices. Kingship has been a common thing in antiquity. Kings die, kings get avenged, which is normal. Like today, if I have a sibling who dies and I avenge them, you could model that into an ancient myth, like what we're seeing, even though the reality is here's a real king who gets killed and he really does get avenged. They're making narrative out of the history of this repeating itself, is the point.
Good point.
Something like that. Of course, we wouldn't necessarily draw that Osiris himself actually existed and Horus actually, but I think those myths are modeled after human observations in the world. This is the point. We're back to here's this geography. Here's things that happen in this geography. Here's a great story founded off of this geography and how humans behave or whatever. Human reformation. The problem with progressive Christianity is it enables the extremist. They don't stand up against extremism that their religion helps create.
Yeah.
I don't know if all progressives do that. I think
what they mean by this, is that so for you to become a fundamentalist, you kind of have to go through the traditional the route of being a moderate, right? Like the moderates are the door to the fundamentalists. The fundamentalists don't just operate in there. Like without the moderates, you might not have the fundamentalists to have. Like the moderates are the ones who we accept. They're a part of society. We don't. There's nothing wrong with them. But since those places exist, fundamentalism can also exist right next to it, right?
It's super, super muddy. This is a very hard thing to say and blame. I wouldn't put any blame on moderates because they're moderates. I just want to make the point that could be seen in this super chat, right? That we don't want to do that. And I know that humanist reformation isn't trying to necessarily say that,
right?
But it can come across that way is let's now blame progressives for how fundamentalists act. And I don't think that we shouldn't do that either. You see, I know several progressives and even some of the scholars I have on that are Christians at the end of the day who are so against fundamentalism and they write against it. They speak against it. Look, Dan McClellan. Okay. I don't know his ontology. I can't read his mind on what he actually believes. He never says that. He identifies with Mormonism. Okay. That's his cultural outlook. He was raised one his whole life. But this guy spends every waking moment, every video to give factual, like scholarly information.
Yeah.
You got to give guys like that credit. And so I would put him in that progressive. I don't know. Christians won't call him a Christian because he was Mormon. This is already a problem. You know what I mean? But it's like, I don't know, man. The world is so much grayer.
Dale C. Ellison Jr. is one example of a Christian, but you can see him as a really good scholar. He's not. You're not calling him out for fallacies. Like he's just Dale Ellison. Like he's a good scholar. He's also a Christian.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people like that. A lot of people.
There are a lot of people like that. These are tough ones to even try and wrestle because I wouldn't blame them. Is all I'm saying. I wouldn't come across like it's their fault because even when you and me were deconverting, we went through a phase where we were exiting that fundamentalism and became more esoteric, more, Manly P. Hall, more spiritualist and stuff. We were still holding on to certain things. And I mean, you might have certain things you still hold on to. I don't know. I don't try to pick your brain, Neil. At the end of the day, though, you're nothing like you were, just like I'm nothing like I was. We're trying to learn and be as factual with the data as we can,
Yeah.
Lev again says, not to say Osiris was historic.
Right.
Drew also mentioned the fallen kings commemorated with phallic monuments a la Osiris. Caesar and Lincoln get obelisk. JFK got a big rocket going into space. JFK had a big one. Is that what you're trying to say?
That's a good point, though. Like these are things that, if we were living in an ancient society, and this was the normal religious ideas of the day, you might map on some sort of God to the Apollo mission. You might met, Apollo. There you go. It's Apollo that did it.
It is Apollo.
So you could see how that would happen, right?
Absolutely. It's interesting to think. We know that the phallus is represented in the obelisk. So they were huge on that. Wait till I get this course out with Karen or Dr. Karakuni. She goes into the Egyptian mythology creation and the various creation accounts. And then we get into resurrection and what they believed about resurrection. And they have such a complex mythology. I did not expect it to be as complex as it is.
Right.
Ichapod, Christians like Ruslan like distancing themselves from the embarrassing parts of literalism, but can hardly explain why they take other parts literally. Ooh. Interesting.
Something you have to ask them,
Taking jabs there. Brady.
I have to watch more Ruslan. I will check it out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what I just know what he told us today, which I was mostly okay with,
I mean, I get where this super chat's coming from.
Sure.
I totally get it. Like, where do you draw the line? Okay, so you're willing to say it's mytho-history in Genesis. Then you get to the Exodus. Is that mytho-history? Is Joshua's conquest mytho-history? I say yes. If we're going to be fair, let's do it. Because archaeology does not support this narrative.
Right.
But the narrative might be conveying, as Jordan Peterson will say, it's a story, it's a narrative, and there's something deep about. There's the microcosm within the narrative of the.
It's happening every minute, even right now. It's happening all the time.
It's happening all the time. At every moment.
Things, yeah, happening.
Now, I remember
at an infinite level.
Yes, yeah. It's actually truer now than it ever was. If it's and like he goes off and
Joe Rogan just goes, "Whoa,
dude, mushrooms, holy crap, bro." Yeah. I love this Ichapod because if we do see it for what I think it is, and it's not just what I think. I mean, this is what I think scholars are coming to. When we get to New Testament literature, I mean, imagine you put the New Testament as the last thing you studied. And we studied Heracles, Asclepius, the various narratives of divine men, historic and mythical. And we saw they go through these common, again, as we've been seeing brought up from our friend here, Lev, these tropes that happen, whether mythical or historical people. And they all have this apotheosis where they ascend to heaven after they die. And then we go, hold on, what's this book I'm reading? This book says New Testament. Oh, the gospel of the Son of God, Jesus Christ. And look, I actually got this from a Christian friend of mine, the Burroughs of Berea podcast. Anyway, oh, wow. Okay, hold on. I've seen something like this already before. And it came from this legendary, this fable material from Livy or the various other historical writings. And, oh, wow, this looks a lot. Nothing's identical. Don't even have to say it copied. You don't even have to say this has anything to do genetically with this material.
Right.
But it looks and walks and talks and smells like fable. But this one really happened. And I'm going to just, ignore how this genre in its milieu would impact our understanding of this genre. It just doesn't make sense to me. I keep harping on it, but
Philip definitely teleported after he baptized the Ethiopian.
Now that happened.
That's fact.
That's fact. If you dispute this, talk about hellfire. Talk about hellfire. Mr. Monster, it's funny. I used to really believe the Da Vinci Code movie was fact and that there was a living relative of Jesus somewhere.
Isn't it true that the author of Da Vinci Code has even said this is not, like, even he's like coming forth and saying this is not real?
I think so.
But still, even with that being said, people still believe it. They don't care.
It's a cool story. Yeah. Like the clever, ingenious imagination that comes behind a movie like that, or really a book that gets turned into a movie. That's the point. That's the point.
Of course.
That's believable. I could see why the Gospels are believable. I could see why someone would think Romulus ascended or Caesar Augustus or any of these other things. I can understand why they would do this. So couch it in that. Seth of Valhalla says, I take it you guys don't watch the World Cup.
Not really.
I haven't.
I'll check it out when if it's in front of me, like if I'm going somewhere and they're like I love it. I like it. I just don't know much about it. I'm not keeping up on it. I've always been more of a football person.
I'm more of a chalice.
That is football, but I should say American football because they call it football.
Yeah.
We have American. I guess I'm just too American. No, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Did you hear me? I said I'm more of a chalice kind of guy, not a cup kind of guy. So, Roger Williams, my concept is that the super right Christian nationalists will get violent or more violent when they see that the end times haven't materialized. This is why I'm trying to educate. I hope more people look at the apocalypticism, educational stuff on where does this stuff come from? How ancient Israelites would have had these ideas. We were just talking about before the stream, Persian Zoroastrianism and apocalypticism. You were going to bring up Michael Jones's video about this and how he says that this text is 500 AD. That may be the oldest extant writing about this. We know for a fact that Persian Zoroastrianism has been around for millennia before.
Yeah, it's so well sourced, even in Greek text. Right. Plato and Aristotle and those people are referencing Zoroaster and the Magi and what they like. You have the Gothas. There's multiple texts, and but yeah, that was a whole different topic. But yeah,
just bringing it out that's why we're trying to do this.
I think the point you were making is, there's this a Christian will say, well, what this text wasn't fully developed in its current form until 500, the year 400 or something, 5th century.
Right.
Okay, 5th century text. All right, the Bible, the oldest complete Bible, Christian Bible, is from 325. So does that mean I get to say that the Bible doesn't show up till 325? No, of course not. Because we know that there's manuscripts that predate it. We have fragments. We have its source. There's text. We know that these texts developed and then get put together at that time. It's the same thing.
Right. Gray's 174. Have you ever covered Jesus in the Talmud?
I have with Dr. James Tabor. Dr. James Tabor and I did a video about Jesus and Pantera, but not just Pantera. Also, we also talk about the sources in the Talmud and the Mishnah in particular that mention Jesus, people using Jesus's name to heal snake bites and stuff. So we went through all that stuff. So yeah, I would say yes, I have with Dr. Tabor.
Perfect time to shamelessly plug this. Dr. Tabor is doing a course. We're about to launch. That sneeze hurt me. Someone pray in the name of Jesus right now for me. Dr. Tabor and I are about to launch his Jesus and the Dead Sea Scroll course. And, it's going to be really, really fun. So I hope people check it out.
Definitely.
Dr. Cheryl, thank you for being in the chat and being such a lovely supporter everywhere. I mean, on all the social medias, you're constantly plugging away. Amazing. All the great scholars. Really appreciate you.
Me too.
What do the two of you think the hook is that keeps Christians from moving beyond their understanding of the biblical texts?
Right off the bat, I'll say it's hope for we have everything figured out, because one of the things that we all have in common as humans is, what do we do? What is this reality that we're in? Why is there something rather than nothing? What happens when we die? Does anyone have it figured out? And then religion comes along and says, we have it figured out for you. It's all okay, especially if you grow up in one. So I think growing up in the tradition, even if you grew up Catholic and then became an evangelical, it's still some of the same cultural, Jesus is God, believe in Jesus, you'll go to heaven. And so that aspect of of hoping everything's figured out and these ancient texts are right. I hope they're right, because I don't want to die. I want to live forever. That's what I think is going on. I think that's the hook.
There's a lot of layers to this question in terms of answering the problem that I think is, and it's a natural thing. I think it's the antiquity. I think it's the majority of people in your group. So you're raised in a tradition. It's kind of the father taught me something. My daddy's right, and my daddy can beat your daddy up. There's that tribalistic. I was raised. That can be for some, not all. It also may be subjective, emotional attachment to the identity that you're given. For me, I think the hook was that there was this compassionate, loving father when I first heard the message who had me covered, who sent his son a loving message, even though it was, when you really think about it, it's like he slaughters his son according to the theology, he purposely sends him to have him killed on my behalf, that kind of approach. But it was really this loving, compassionate father who would never let me down, loves me unconditionally, got me sucked in. And then, hey, there's this long-standing tradition. You think all these people can be wrong?
Right.
You're going to go against all that. And you got to get outside of that bubble and look at the Muslim world. If you're a Christian, which means that Muhammad is not the last prophet. If you're a real Christian that's based on the tradition, you're not looking at Muhammad as the final prophet. So you have this discrepancy of like, why are there over a billion Muslims believing in Islam? So I'm just saying there are more than I think one thing that play factors into why there's this hook. And right. I think there's a really powerful story there.
Right.
And I saw an episode, just one comment on this about evolution. And that was why the title of the video was something like, why did the Homo sapien group survive, and why are the Neanderthal no longer alive? They were much stronger primates than us. They had bigger brains than us. What was it that made us different? And the person said it was story connecting larger number of us, and that we can only find like up to 50 or so Neanderthal in a group.
Yeah, they would live in small groups, like in caves, separate from other Neanderthal groups. Whereas Homo sapiens would sort of click together in this
we find a narrative that we could construct,
collective
even
society.
if it's a fictive narrative. Look at nationalism. Look at how passionate people are about their national identity. It's bad. It's worse than sometimes religion. I mean, it's so bad, people are ready to get violent. Now, it's not just that religion can be coupled into it. Look at history, the way people annihilated people and fought wars over this stuff. It wasn't the religion itself, though. I think there's a human thing about it. But that, I think, would explain identity is like the core message, and our story's true. And we need to capitalize on that. I think there's a hook to it in some way. And we're trying to educate to break those walls down as much as we can. It's not easy, very difficult to unteach these things that we've held so dear. It's super complex question that Dr. Cheryl asked, but that's my 2 cents. Human Reformation, keep evangelizing against these religions. The past 10 years of vocal atheist has had a big impact. Remember, Christianity has evangelized for over 1,000 years. We are doing good with just 10 years of active atheist evangelism.
Well, you know, you can go back to the Thomas Paine and some of these liberals coming out of the 18th and 17th centuries, you know, pushing back against some of the dogmas of their day. I don't know. I think there's always been some sort of maybe not in like the not Middle Ages or but maybe there was, but I'm just saying like I think it's been going on for a little. I get what humanist formation is saying. The last 10 years really is getting more normalized now. Now it's like kind of like this is part of normal. This is a normal idea for a lot of people. Whereas just 10, 20 years ago, it wasn't as normalized. So yeah, I agree.
I want to the one thing I want to harp on this is this. I know I identify as someone by definition who's an atheist. Meaning I personally am a metaphysical atheist, philosophical atheist. I'm somebody who thinks there is no God. I don't lack theism, even though if you pressed me, I really don't know if there is something, okay? But I don't believe there is. I don't have any inclination on thinking that. I understand consciousness hasn't been solved, but like all things, that we once put some superstitious or unexplainable thing to, we have recognized there's probably a natural cause. And as far as consciousness goes, I apply it to the same category of something we may not have figured out yet, but we're trying to solve, and we're getting there. And it's super complex. I get it. Life is complex. A few centuries ago, we didn't know how to explain the DNA. Like, we didn't understand how to get down into the cells and stuff. These were a black box to people like Darwin. I think they will be explained. However, I also don't want to necessarily make everyone think that that conclusion's correct. That is not my goal. You can believe that there's something to the universe, a mind or whatever. I have no problem with that. But I want to say the stories, the narratives that we think are the dogma of truth, that I want to tear down. I want people to realize your book is not this sacred thing that directly came down from heaven. That goes for Muslims, that goes for Christians, that goes for Jews, that goes for anybody. I'm not convinced, and I want to make a case for it. I want to explain to you why I see human fingerprints through and through to the very ground on this whole thing. You can believe what you want to believe, and I'm not trying to make people not. However, if I teach you some critical thinking skills and you think that I'm on the right track here, cool. I encourage you to maybe draw the conclusions I might be. If I'm missing something, I'm missing something. I'm trying to be as honest and fair as I can. So I needed to say that, Neil, because you and me have talked off record about a lot of the communities sometimes are very tribalistic, even within atheism. And it's like, you don't think like me on this point, and then you're ostracized and condemned and damned. And I don't want to be that way. I want to try and understand we don't all perceive the world the same way, and we all have room to grow and try to empathize. And
I think the most honest approach is, well, we don't know everything. We haven't figured it out. We can't prove any way or the other. I have my beliefs on the way what a certain person might call God, and they based off what their religion says. I don't believe that. No. For me to say that for sure that I know what this reality is, and there is nothing, or there is this or that or the other. I have no idea. I think the honest approach is to say we don't know yet. We'll get there.
Well, yeah, I think, but if I took the track record of how things have been explained with natural cause, I think it was one of the theoretical physicists who said we pretty much nailed down laws of nature and understand how the universe works. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson who pointed this out too. Look, it's not that mysterious, the universe itself. You go beyond that or try to figure out how universes work and stuff, we don't have answers to. It's just, my point is there are some very amazing humans who are very esoteric. They're not dogmatic. They're not carrying a dogma. They're not, my view's correct and yours is, they're not doing that, but they think there's something. Like my wife, she's right above me in her office. She thinks there's something.
Yeah.
Universe.
I think most people do.
It's not I understand why, even naturally, scientifically, I understand why humans would naturally draw that conclusion. We had, who was the scholar on? I don't have the book here, but I have the ebook. It's the Phantom God. And then the other one is pretty much, he goes and talks about how children in their mother's womb, they know this being called their mother, who is a soft, still, small voice. And when they cry, even if their mom's not around, they know mom will come to rescue them, infants. And we're neurologically wired to think something's there. Even if mom wasn't there, we would think mom's there. Well, that small leap between mother and father from a newborn child to something out there, it's built in us. We're wired to think that way naturally. So that leap is not ridiculous or absurd on why I think people do it. I just think it's one of those small leaps in our evolutionary process and in our existence that we're making a leap, assuming something's there that isn't there. That's my opinion. And I think it's like that weird Mariah Carey song, that hero song. I know I'm throwing it up there, but there's some philosophy in it that I think is deep. When I'm alone, she pretty much goes into the lyrics talking about when I'm alone, I realized that it was me. In me, the hero existed. It was I the whole time who had what it took, the strength to overcome, and the people around me who helped me do it. We always talk about, thank you, God, for saving her. And then there's the surgeon who just cut the brain tumor out. And you're thinking, God, what about that brain surgeon who really had the skill, took the time to learn? And, I just think we miss it sometimes. So
Sure. Good point.
we went on a tangent there. I apologize.
It happens. It happens.
Hengfa, am I pronouncing this right? Have you ever heard how to properly pronounce this?
I'm not sure at all how to pronounce that, but thank you. Yeah.
Loving the Hitchens mentions tonight. Thank you. I enjoy watching him from time to time.
I love watching some Hitchens. Hitchens was great. Hitchens was great. He was very entertaining and very amazing personality.
Yeah, he really was poetic. Very passionate. Lebowski, Jefferson, need content debunking the Hebrew Israelite movement going on. You could consider them a sect of fundamentalists. And with that being the case, hatred towards other races and cultures is pushed heavy. It's a sad situation.
Now, yeah, I'm not sure which. I think there's. I'm trying to think. Hebrew Israelite movement.
It depends on the sect for sure.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that call themselves that. So, but yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, there's a lot of dogmatic groups out there that, that's just, they're out there. There's a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, there's British Israelites who think they're the chosen British race of Israelites, that the Caucasians are somehow the chosen ones.
Right.
You have this also in Hebrew Israelite type groups. I think the enemy in some of them is people with white skin. Puerto Ricans or Spanish people and Africans and stuff fit certain tribes, and they have a modern, way of dividing up how that works. The person that I've always just kept deferring to was Garfield, who does all the YouTube videos, and he has the Dagger Squad, as he calls it. And he does a lot of this stuff debunking it. And believe it or not, even in the Christian vein, who is it? I can't even think. The other night I popped in one of his lives just to say, hey, because, I'm friendly with everybody.
Yeah.
Help me out in the chat. If you know the Christian apologist, he's a Calvinist guy, but he actually goes out of his way to kind of debunk some of these particular theological positions in the Hebrew Israelite communities.
Not sure. Not ringing a bell right now.
Someone in the chat's got to help me out here. There's got to be someone out of the 375 people watching
that
knows who I'm talking about.
I have no idea. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm waiting to see if someone has to help me out here. All right, I'm gonna have to look it up. Hebrew Israelite. Let me do this.
Vocab Malone. Someone said.
Did someone comment that?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes. So even vocab. I mean, I gotta agree with him when he comes in with certain things, because looking at my Bible, looking at this and going, yep, there's some stuff here that I don't think factors in. But that happens with systematic theology, period. So when you create a system out of texts that are not meant to be written for complementing each other, various theological ideas, you're going to run into some systematic problems.
Right.
If you think that the Bible from Genesis to Revelation was written with this single narrative that was all in unity, harmonizing, and it's meant to be for like one author wrote it, so to speak, through the Spirit, and I get why people do that, you're gonna have some problems. This is why Arminians and Calvinists exist. Both theologies are biblical. You'll find both within the text.
Right.
You'll find various doctrines and teachings. Just depends on where you turn and how you're perceiving that literature.
Yeah, that's what a lot of those Protestant early those big like Calvin and them, they really wanted to go back to the text. Not like forget about the rituals of mass and going like this. What does the text say? That's kind of what the approach was. It seems like.
Right. It seems like that, and I think there was a lot of that. However, there was, like everybody, you have your modern context. I love the story about Martin.
You're just replacing it with a new one now. Yeah.
Right. But I think they were trying to do things that were radical for their time.
Right.
Martin Luther, though, what I thought was interesting is the one thing he wouldn't agree with Calvin on, and they had like 15 or 16 points they debated, and they were all like, thumbs up, thumbs up. They get to the Eucharist, and they do not find any agreement. Martin Luther slamming his fist as it's recounted, "This is my body. This is," and of course he's yelling it.
What else could it mean? Right.
It means what he said. This is my body. And of course, consubstantiation occurs because Calvinists had a spiritual perception of understanding the Eucharist. And there's differences between.
And because of that, a lot of churches today don't have any communion at all.
There are a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of Protestant evangelicals and a lot of Baptists that don't do any communion at all year round. Nothing, never. You eat with them after the ceremony. You all break bread together, and there's like this idea of like that's happening within you, like it's spiritual. Right. But it's not like you're not walking up to a priest and he's not handing you any, that's not happening in those churches.
Imagine we went to church tomorrow, and the priest or pastor or whoever goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, before I tell you what the Lord said in this situation of eating his flesh and drinking his blood, I want to tell you about a story called Euripides talks about with Dionysus. I want to tell you about the shredding of the Titans grinding Dionysus with their teeth, and why the raw flesh in this text is what we're seeing with Jesus. There was a man named Dionysus. He was really a god who was born of a mortal woman and Zeus. And, a simile. And like go into the story and explain why this story comes from an older Egyptian story of Osiris and Set, and like go into the various mythologies in Egypt and how it was agricultural, and this evolved all the way down to Jesus today. So when we do this tradition, it didn't start with our Lord and Savior. It started with other people's Lords and Saviors. And we are now initiating our own tradition. How would that break the walls down, you think?
And Eusebius would have did this he would have said, these are all leading up to Christ. That's why there's so much similarities happening.
Right.
They're trying to find it. They were at the wrong time.
That's how he dealt with it. Others might have said those are demons. Right. And they're trying to imitate because they knew Jesus was coming. So Satan made it look like them. And it's like, who's right? Which Christian's right about this? Craig and Ford in the house. John F. White, good to see you here, man. Hallelujah, chaps. Great show this evening.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the love. Neil, I got to plug you, man. You hung out with me this long. We've been 2.5. Dude, I didn't realize time flew
by.
Oh my gosh. We really did. So I hope people know about Neil's YouTube channel. There's 373 of you. I'm going to make sure that I post this here in the chat. Any final questions before we wrap up? Anybody?
No, that was great. I enjoyed it. I think we said a lot. I think it's well said. I think that's it.
I put this in the comments or down in my description. I didn't play it. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, The Inquisitive Bible Reader, highly recommend. I was going to play this to let you hear the divine visitors in disguise and point out how Sodom and all these other stories have very common trope. And they are obviously myth. They're not literal history in any way. Here is that YouTube video in case you want to watch that after the stream. It's also in the description. So if you're missing it in the chat, you can go down in the description and see this video. I'm sure that the content creator will appreciate the fact that I'm promoting and plugging them. Now I'm looking for you, Neil. I need that gnosis, bro. What are you working on, man? You got to plug yourself, bro.
I got some good. I got a video tomorrow coming out that I did with Candida Moss.
Ooh, can you tease us?
So we did talk about a lot of stuff. We talked about the tradition of the martyr and where it all comes from. We're talking about how Socrates and some of the Greeks have that legendary martyr status. And then obviously within Judaism, you have the prophets and you have, the suffering servant and then Jesus. And then all of a sudden, all the stories about Paul and Peter and Polycarp, they're all being martyred. St. Andrew and all these stories about all these martyrs. We get into, there's thousands of them, by the way, thousands of them. We talk about the Bacchic movement. Sorry. There was a Bacchic movement in Rome, and it was persecuted hardcore. Like they were persecuted and they were considered to be illegal. Like they were being sought after, all that stuff. And But the Christians, they kind of had this similar story, but it turns out that it wasn't as bad as they said it was. And it doesn't get bad until way later for a specific period of time under Diocletian, but not under Nero. They're not getting. So we talk about all that stuff and other things as well. So that's coming out soon.
That book she wrote, Myth of Persecution. I'm not kidding. Sometimes I'll put music on while I'm reading, as long as it's not disturbing my thinking. It helps me to kind of just zone out on the words sometimes on the page. Sometimes I have to turn all the music off, but sometimes music helps. And I had this music just right, and it was giving me the feels in the section of this Greek story with the goddess, or no, it wasn't a goddess, it was a princess or the king's daughter. And I don't remember the name of the daughter, but like they needed to go to war and they couldn't get the winds to get the ships out of the bay. So the king promised, I can't remember how it went, but the daughter ended up being sacrificed. And he told them, come, I have a husband for you. She comes with the mom. It was a lie. He tricked her to come and then ends up having to sacrifice her. And she's like, let this be, this is my gift or my honor. And I'm going to die for this nation so that you guys can win the war or something. It was martyrdom. She was willing, after she was at first reluctant, she was willing to go to her death on purpose. And it kind of was like this 400 or 500 years before Jesus, before the Maccabees martyrdom story in the Greek world.
Yeah. And that becomes part of the culture in every respect, not just one religion, but like being someone that stood up for the truth against some sort of like powers that be. That's a really like legendary thing that is just all over the board.
Well, we got one more here. Apostate of Mind podcast. I got to give a plug to Apostate of Mind. And the reason is they are trying so hard to grow. We got to help them.
By the way, this is bringing up a good point. Is like we have our links in the description for if you want to come to Israel with me and Derek and a couple of scholars, we're doing it. And you have a lot of time to get a down payment down and pay. Like you and Derek are doing this too. We're paying we're paying for our trip. And it's worth every penny. We did it already. We know what we're in for.
We know what we're doing.
We're going back. That's how fun it was.
Go subscribe. I just posted this in the chat. Apostate of Mind says, I can't wait to meet you fine gentlemen in Israel next year. Thank you both for all the amazing content. Look, we've got Dr. Kill, Dr. Kip Davis, me, you. We're going to be having Jennifer Birds going. Matthew Munger may go.
Yeah.
We also have scholars that are over there in Israel who are going to be there at the Qumran site, female academics that know this place inside out, and are going to help us on the tour educate.
Cool.
It was so much fun. I mean, it was so much fun. I don't even know if I had the link in the description. I'm supposed to be putting that in the description in every video just so that people can have access, and I forgot to mention
MythVision Tours or Gnostic Informant Tours.com.
I need to get the link just to be safe.
Yeah.
There was so much fun. Remember the night we went down into Hinnom?
Yeah, we're going to do that again.
Oh my gosh, we're leading a tour this time. It's not just going to be like, we're actually going down into the Valley of Hinnom, and it was creepy.
Yeah.
It was cool though. It was cool. Trying to find that link. In case anybody's interested in checking it out, you can put a little something down payment to reserve your spot, and then it gives you time to make more. I swear it was an experience I have never experienced in my life, and it was a blast. I learned so much. We went to the town right next to Nazareth and tell them about the stuff we saw on the ground and in these houses. These are Jewish homes, by the way.
We found mosaics of Orpheus and Dionysus and satyrs and, Greek Aphrodite, like all types of amazing mosaics on the floors and on the walls everywhere. It was great. We saw the zodiac in what is it called? The Jewish synagogue. There was a zodiac and the beautiful archaeology there. So definitely check that out.
Someone said, or it's just Jerusalem syndrome. Derek, Jim and his stuff is trippy, man. Something there, man. Well, there are people who get that. There are people who get, and I don't know about the whole airwaves thing, but there are people who do get this, like they go to the Holy Land and they're like, oh my God, they get like sucked into this is so true. And it becomes almost like a spiritual experience, the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
I get it. There's some people who do that. I imagine people who do this for Mecca, who go to the Kaaba in Islam or various other holy sites for their particular place. This will be a secular historical. You can have your faith or not. It doesn't matter. This is not one of those kind of things. We're giving you the historical scholarly take. We're going to have scholars who are doing that on the tour.
Yeah.
They're not going to be giving you, oh, well, this 4th century site. This is really where Jesus was. You're going to get that. If you go to tours, especially faith-based or church-based ones that are over there, you're going to get this. This is the house Peter was at, and this is where Jesus really was crucified, and this is where, no, every serious scholar may have an opinion, or they think this might be a place. Some might say, no, this is literary completely. And
it reminds me of when Candida Moss did the interview on Fox on the Bill O'Reilly's show on the O'Reilly Factor.
Right.
He's talking to her, the scholar, the expert, and he's going, no, Joseph of Arimathea was very wealthy. We know he exists. We know where he was. We have all the data. Like, he's saying this to somebody who lives this stuff, as if he's telling her, like, oh yeah, there's a source that you just don't know about. Like, it's so wild to see that. By the way, I have clips of that interview in the video because I asked her about that interview, so I have a highlight reel of that interaction. She was great in that. By the way,
when is that coming out?
So, maybe tomorrow or the next day, but later.
Okay.
But probably tomorrow. I'm probably finishing it tonight after this.
I'm going to add the tour information in the description. We should do some more videos because a lot of people haven't seen that. They probably don't even know about it yet, or they need to be reminded. Maybe later I'll look into it. I hope we can get everybody to go. Apostate of Mind podcast is going to be there, and we're going to do some recording.
Yeah.
So Mark's going to be making some YouTube videos. We're going to be doing a lot of content, and when we get back,
you and I have multiple cinema rigs going, 4K, 6. Like, we're ready this time. Now we went last time as ready as we could have been.
Yeah.
Now we know what we need to do to be better prepared to make better content. So we're not going to miss it this time.
We're going to be cutting out, like we did. There was so much we did on that tour that I don't think we got to absorb and really focus on some of the more highlights. Yeah. But we're going to get some great content. I love going down and haggling in Jerusalem with the guys, I was like, no. 50 shekels. No,
it was so fun.
45. That's it. I'm not doing
those nights in Jerusalem are so, you'll never forget it. When you're walking through that village, when there's all the shops and you're walking through, and it's like, it was so amazing. Just the experience.
Yeah.
I
loved it. Food was so freaking good.
Yeah. I love it. I'm going back. So
anyway. Yeah. Well, let's hope some people will sign up and go.
Yeah.
We want to fill the bus up. Look, while you're on the tour, if you don't want to be on camera, you don't have to be. This is an opportunity to get to hang out with some of the scholars you've been learning from and hang out with us. We're trying to go and have a blast for this trip. So I hope people go. There's so many memories we're going to make. We're going to be there. What is it? 10, 11 days, something like that.
Like that.
9, 10 days. I can't remember. I think it's 9 or 10. Check out the itinerary. Yeah. Any final words from you? Imnag in the house.
Dropping the last minute. Super.
Imnag is in the kingdom. The gates are closing. The final of the final of the final is upon us. Awesome. And thank you for everybody in the chat for being respectful. Disagreeing is fine, especially when Ruslan came in. I know that people can't stand some of the content that comes from Christian apologists and different channels like that. I can tolerate it, even if I disagree. And I hope that others will imitate that. So,
Well said. Nothing to add to that. That was well said.
No final words from you, Neil.
No, that's great. Just keep on putting out content, Derek. You're crushing. You hit 100K, and now you're already looking to 200. Like, you're almost doubling that within like 1% of the time frame it took you to get to 100.
That's true.
This is crazy how that happens.
It is true. It's a weird world. I don't know. Someone introduced me to making documentaries. I don't know who the hell did that. They're kind of smart. They're kind of
Pretty
smart.
fun too. They're pretty good.
Yeah, they might have gnosis.
They work. They work. People like to have a nice video that has a good vibe going on with it.
This is true.
Sometimes
And so
I'm not knocking videos that are like lectures and more academically. I'm not knocking that at all, but it's not for everyone. Some people want something entertaining, you know?
Yeah.
That's all. Nothing. I'm not like,
Are you talking about yourself here? Are you the one who introduced me to this? Is that what it is?
I do it too. That's what I'm saying. I do it too.
No, you taught me, man. If it weren't for Neil, shameless plug.
We both have been talking together and working together. So it's not
You
like
introduced me to the idea though of like
yeah,
giving.
I didn't invent making a this is just a thing, yeah.
I know, but I saw that it worked, and I was like, you know, I've worried about doing it because the amount of time and energy that goes into making them it's serious. And I thought to myself, my channel's so used to pumping out a video a day that it would harm me, I would imagine, to do that. What if it gets the same amount of views the rest of my videos get? I need to do this. I do this full time, and this is how I'm able to do this. And I thought, man, if it weren't for people on the Patreon, I'd be screwed. There's just no way I would have been able to sit there that week.
Exactly. And if I just could, thank you for my Patreons that are watching and stuff, just because you're right. Those are the people that allow me to be able to step back and focus on quality over the quantity.
Right. Well, that's what I'm trying to do, is a little bit of both. I know the documentaries are obviously going to get far more views. Yes, we have sensational titles. Watch the content. The content's going to be good stuff. And we're trying to use scholarly works to do it. Yeah. Some of it might be on the outskirts, not consensus. Some of it will be consensus. Sure. But yeah, thanks for everybody. Just everybody. You disagree with us or not, thank you. We love you. I hope you have a wonderful day. Neil, thanks for your time, man, and coming and hanging out with me and stuff.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for inviting me.
Let's do this again soon. And thank you, Ruslan, if you're watching to this point. Apology for misunderstanding that video, thinking you were trying to like scare Christians and hype the BS up. But I still think your Sodom and Gomorrah stuff is just a leap in logic in terms of drawing your conclusions. But I can't wait to meet you in person and actually do some stuff where we can go back and forth and have a fair back and forth dialogue on where we're both coming from. So absolutely. If you watch this. All right. We are MythVision, and you have just attained
true gnosis.
True gnosis.